So good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Wireless Global Congress Paris 2024. I hope you enjoyed last evening the networking drinks reception, that we had a good time, and you are ready for another fantastic day of presentations and sessions on our Congress. I will start with the health and safety policy, just in case any accident, any emergency may come up. As well, the Wi-Fi. I already promised my team that I will give them a special bonus if next year we have open roaming. So we'll work hard for next time to have open roaming available. And for this, as well, recognize all the sponsors of the event. Without your support and your participation, we'll not be able to have these shows. And for this morning, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers covering topics from open roaming to 6G to enterprise connectivity, and really presenting some real use cases on how Wi-Fi is contributing to improve user experience. On the agenda, next speaker and the first speaker of the day will be Matt McPherson from Cisco, and we'll be talking about open roaming. So Matt, please join me on stage.
Morning. Thank you. All right. So open roaming. So I've been talking about open roaming for a long time, and interestingly enough, we have some of the inventors sitting here in the audience, and I told them, I said, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about where did it come from? What was the generation of open roaming? And so to do that, I actually pulled some old slides from when we first started talking about it before it actually came into reality. So what is open roaming? I mean, what is it, basically? And sometimes I think people have different ideas because they participate in open roaming in different parts of the ecosystem. But the question is what is it that we're actually trying to solve? And so if you look at open roaming, what open roaming really is what? It's frictionless roaming. How can we achieve frictionless roaming? So if we look at this here, again, this is a slide I hope you've seen before, but the idea is how do we open this whole roaming domain? So let's break this apart a little bit. So I said frictionless and I said roaming. So let me ask you a question. What is roaming? I mean, we have ideas on roaming and we think about it in different contexts, but what is roaming really? Roaming is business relationships. It's partnerships. You have these roaming relationship business partnerships, what? To make your service better. So that's what roaming is really about, and we're all familiar with it, especially in the 5G context. So when we first started thinking about open roaming, there's a couple of models out there. We knew that we needed to create this federation, and I'm going to talk about this identity federation and why we did it. But what we did is we stepped back and we said, what kind of abstractions are out there that exist today, and how did they generate mass? And what we looked at? We said, well, let's think about this from a perspective of finance. So what's an abstraction that everybody understands and uses every day? It's like a Visa card or a MasterCard. Now, why is it that anywhere you go, hotel, store, wherever you go, it takes Visa? It takes Visa because everyone has a Visa in their pocket. Why does everyone have a Visa in their pocket? Because everywhere you go, they take it. So these things are mutually beneficial, right? And so that's the idea. Now, if every bank had to issue its own card and you didn't have this abstraction, we'd be carrying much bigger wallets. Right? But you'd have to have all these business relationships that are established, and they would have to establish them themselves. So, you know, one of the things we did is we said, so how does that generate mass? Because who's the first person that used Visa? Because, you know, the first time you had a credit card, nobody took it, right? And so this is what we've been going through as we've been attempting to develop mass, and that's what we're doing through open roaming here at the WBA, is generating mass. So what do I mean by mass? What I mean by mass is that we incorporate additional access networks and additional identity providers. So like I said, everyone carries a Visa because every place takes it. Every place takes it because everyone carries it. Now, if we, what we said is we're going to plant the flag at WBA, and we're going to allow these new business relationships. So what can some of these new business relationships be? And so we wanted to make sure that we took any kind of identity. Now, when it comes to roaming, most times when we think about roaming, it's really a homogeneous thing. When we think about some of the most successful roaming scenarios, like what GSMA did, we think about 5G roaming working anywhere in the world, right? Now, in order to make 5G roam anywhere in the world, you need about 700 roaming relationships. Now, when I talked to some of the carriers, I said, well, what does it take to actually achieve that? You know, how do you negotiate those relationships? It's one of the reasons that the GSMA was actually formed, was to provide a place where people could establish those roaming relationships. And he said, oh, you know, we typically have a couple hundred lawyers that are working on that, negotiating those deals. And I said, okay, so if there's about 700 roaming relationships out there, that means there's 700 operators that you have to roam with. Now, we had a problem when we started looking at this for Wi-Fi, because last year we crossed over 600 million guest Wi-Fi networks. 600 million. So if you need to establish that kind of scale, then you need to be able to abstract this, right? You have to have a way for this thing to build mass. Now, as open roaming takes off, and I always like, and I'm going to show Tiago's favorite chart on where we're getting all of this adoption. But what's interesting about adoption is that builds mass into this federation to the point where this federation starts to generate gravity. And what do I mean by that? It means that if you want to play, you want to be in the federation. And then next thing you know, we don't actually have to sell it, because there's pull. And in fact, we know that there's pull in the in our customer community. It's really easy at some level, and the easiest way to explain this is to solve an immediate problem. So there was a tactical side of open roaming, and there was a strategic side of open roaming. The tactical side is the immediate problem is, how do we automatically and securely onboard? The strategic side was, how do we form new sets of relationships that allow us to move across multiple different access networks from multiple different communities, multiple different verticals. And so when you look at this, this is sort of unique around open roaming. What you see here is that there's a ton of identity providers out there. An identity could be a SIM. An identity could be a banking identity. Think of your bank, right? That's an identity. It's a strong identity. It could be a web, cloud, or device identity. It could be an Apple ID. It could be a Samsung ID. You have all these different identities. An identity could be a government ID, right? Can open roaming be used to government applications? Well, I'm going to show you how in just a minute. It can obviously be an enterprise identity. We all have an identity that's associated with where we work. There's venue and loyalty identities. So all of these identities then can be used or applied, because the identity associates a level of security in knowing who you are. Now, I'm going to talk about privacy in just a minute. That can be applied against multiple different access networks. Now, it turns out that everybody sitting here has many of these identities on the phone in their hand or their pocket. Hopefully it's in their pocket. If it's in your hand, you're not listening to me, but you know. So everybody has these identities. Everybody does. So if these identities are already ubiquitous, and if we can use those identities to securely connect to any access network, then what we can do is we can unify these access networks together. So not only can we be connected all the time, but we have multiple choices when it comes to security, when it comes to bandwidth, when it comes to what the primary purpose is to create new business models and new business relationships. Now, like I said, when you roam with 5G, it's typically 5G roaming with 5G. I would call that homogeneous roaming. When you look at open roaming, no such limitation. You can actually roam against different types of identities such that you're opening up that complete domain. Now, sometimes people say, well, you shouldn't have called it open roaming. That sounds insecure. Okay, I can see where they might think that, but isn't what the open and open roaming means. What does the open and open roaming mean? Anybody can join the federation, any access network. So the next goal is to solve friction. Why is this hard to use? Can we solve friction? So open roaming, it had to be extremely easy. So there's a couple of areas where you have friction. Where do you have friction? So I already mentioned one. One is scale. So it's very hard to develop a system where you can have roaming relationships between different access entities that are in the hundreds of millions in size. Right? So how do you eliminate the friction? You eliminate the friction, again, through the abstraction. Right? Any bank can get a Visa card. Right? So that any store can take their bank spend, money, whatever, right? So that's the idea. And so what happens is that the identity providers join the federation. When they join the federation, do they have to know all the relationships over here to the access networks? They don't. Any access network can join the federation. And then you know what it can do? It can choose what identities it takes in that federation in order to onboard for their particular business purpose. So instead of getting all these lawyers engaged so that you can start doing these roaming agreements like what they do in 5G, what happens is that this is all pre-done. Now, let me step back for a second. Why do we hit a portal? We hit a portal for multiple reasons. Right, that's how we onboard many times in Wi-Fi today. So I know there's advertising on portals, and I know that we like to monetize and things like that, but there's other things that we have to take care of when we hit a portal. When we hit a portal, we do what? We check a little box. What did we do when we checked the box? You check that box because you're agreeing to the T's and C's associated with going to that access network. And maybe you put in your email address, maybe they're collecting analytics on who connects and whatnot, but we're taking care of some of that legal framework that exists. Now, where you check that box matters when you're automating these types of things. Now, in the 5G world, so I live in the United States, my carrier is AT&T. When I came over here, I immediately connected to Orange. Now, when I connected to the Orange network, why didn't I have to check a box? Why didn't I have to say, yes, I accept the T's and C's for this access network? Because these are prearranged roaming agreements. Do you check a box for 5G? You do. You know when you do it? When you bought your SIM, when you bought your phone, when you went to the store, or you got that SIM or that eSIM put in, what did you do? You signed the agreement with that operator. When you signed the agreement with that operator, you know what you got? You got the box checked, and now you can roam with that 650, 700 different operators on the planet. So why is it when we did onboarding and we used portals for Wi-Fi, we made you check the box in a portal to get onto Wi-Fi? That's not a seamless roam. That's not frictionless. That's friction. So why don't we do the same thing? So what did we do with open roaming? We developed a legal framework. Now, this is important again because, okay, we're back at this 600 million guest access networks. Now, in some cases, these guest access networks are very big. They could represent a city. They could represent a stadium. They could represent an entire airport. But you know what they also could represent? That access point at Joe's coffee shop. Now, say Joe's coffee shop wants to roam with the local university because he's in a town where the university really dominates the commerce. And you know what he'd like to do? He'd like to be able to authenticate students, staff, faculty into his coffee shop. So when they come to his coffee shop, not only do they get good coffee, but they're automatically connected to Wi-Fi. good for his business, good for the university, and you get this automated experience. Now, if Joe wanted to roam with the local university, what's he going to do? He has to call the university? He has to find the IT department? He has to get a lawyer? He has to sign a contract with them? See, this completely breaks down. But what we've done with open roaming is because people have joined the federation, what do? Is we have a legal framework. We've already done it. We've done it. The legal framework is available so that when you join as an access network, when you join as an identity provider, that legal framework is in place. So you've got that pre-checked box so that when you authenticate, you can automatically connect. So Joe can go in, join the federation, and say, I'll take that university credential. And boom. And you know how long it takes him to do it? Bart, how long does it take to join the federation? You know? 5 minutes and 36 seconds. Well, Bart can do it in 5 minutes and 36 seconds, but, you know. But here's the thing. Now, we took all that legal and all that process out of it, yet the coffee shop is still protected and the university is still protected. So see what we're doing here? We're simplifying business relationships so that you can roam into any network anywhere you go. That was the idea of open roaming, and that's what we were looking to achieve. Other areas of friction. So I talked about the size. So we had to make membership easy, and so we can sign on very fast. So I talked about that. I talked about the T's and C's checkbox. Now I want to talk a little bit about cross-pollination, because if you open up all these identities, what you're doing is you're using identities that come from multiple different industries that have different objectives for their industry. So I just gave the example of Joe's coffee shop. So he's running a coffee shop restaurant, and the university is doing education. Are they in the same vertical? But now they can roam. What about the enterprise space? Can an enterprise guest network now roam with a service provider? Yeah. They can, right? So what you're doing is you're crossing boundaries. That's why open roaming, open for business. That's the way to think about it. Easy because the legal framework is done. That's what we're looking to do with open roaming, and that's why it's so important, we believe, to the industry. Now, can you even cross-pollinate this further? Well, what if what you were using as your identity to authenticate into a network like a Starbucks was your Apple ID or maybe your Apple Wallet? Now, not only could you authenticate onto the Wi-Fi, but when you got your coffee, you could pay with the same credential. So now you're cross-pollinating some of these things. Now, this is why the mass in the federation is so important. This is why we want to generate gravity around this. Because as we generate that gravity, these new types of businesses spring up, these new opportunities for startups can spring up to start providing this upper layer of services across this fundamental platform that completely opens the business domain, not only for access networks, but in how we're using identity and how we're securing it. All right, so Bart's going to laugh because I think Bart gave me this slide many years ago. So I talked a little bit about the legal framework. So this doesn't have to be hard. So open roaming as a federation, you can think of it as a root certificate authority. And when an identity provider joins the federation, there's an exchange, and that identity provider gets a key. Same thing with the access network. The access network joins the federation, it gets a key. Now, many brokers could actually issue certificates, but as long as they're connected to the same root, any access network can now connect using any identity provider. Now, don't get me wrong, I know there needs to be policy here, because some people mistake open roaming for, oh, any identity will connect me to any network. No, there's still policy. The access network can decide what identities it'll take, and you know what? The identities can decide what access networks they want to do. So say we go back to the Joe example. Maybe Joe only wants to roam with the local businesses in his area or the university in his area, but he doesn't want to roam with the entirety of EduRoam. Because he doesn't care about the other universities. He cares about the university that's next to him. So he can choose just what credential he wants or how broad that credential can be. He could take the entire EduRoam community, or he could take just that university. So again, very flexible. Now, there's multiple powerful things about this, because now when a network wants to securely connect somebody using a particular identity provider, now when you do that, you know there's no man-in-the-middle attack. The identity provider knows that access network is who they claim to be, and the IDP and the access network also knows who the IDP is who they claim to be, right? So we can secure the network in that way. Now what happens next is these identity providers, they end up with all those identities I was talking about. It ends up on your phone or your device or whatever you're using that's mobile. And then that user moves over into that access network. Now that access network accepts certain credentials, and so it advertises that pre-association, and it says, I take these credentials. The device then looks to see if I have that credential on the phone. If I have that credential on the phone, then it uses the information in the profile, the certificate that was provided by the federation, to create this secure tunnel back to that identity provider. Now, I remember talking with Bart about this in the early days. You notice what this tunnel doesn't do? It doesn't cross the federation. We did that on purpose. So every time somebody authenticates using an identity provider, it's a direct connection. It's created on the spot when you do that authentication. If we would have routed everything through here, a couple of things could have happened. It could have become a bottleneck, or you know what the tempting thing would have been? To start collecting analytics on who's authenticating where, and we didn't want to do that. So the fact that there's a direct connection here, the Federation doesn't see any of it. All the Federation did was facilitate a mechanism for access networks to find the identity providers, the AAA or the HSS or whatever, create a secure link to it by simply taking the information that's in the profile, doing a DNS lookup to find that AAA or again HSS, and to create a tunnel so that they could do that authentication. Not that hard, right? So this is what we're doing with open roaming, but it enabled us to accomplish what I would consider great things. This is an example that I talk about, because when we talk about this, we often talk about it in the context of offload, like how would we use a service provider identity to offload into a Wi-Fi network. And it's easy to go there because it's an obvious application of different types of access networks. But as we look at these new business models, this can be bidirectional. So in other words, you have a venue and they want to take a credential from someone like an AT&T or a Vodafone. Why? Because it's a good credential and there's a lot of people that have it. Right? So they take that credential and their attach rate goes way up because a lot of these access networks will then take that credential. And so that's sort of an obvious business model. So what we've done here is, I said that every time you connect to 5G, no matter what the scenario is, it automatically connects because those background roaming agreements are already there. Now guess what? With open roaming, every time we connect to Wi-Fi, we can achieve the same thing because the legal framework is there, you're part of a common federation, and you can find the place to authenticate so that you can securely onboard somebody into that network. That's what we're trying to do. It should be as seamless as a 5G connection, but it should scale to over 600 million access networks. That's what we're doing. Now, there's lots of ways that this can be applied, but I just wanted to show you, this is, again, an older slide and one of the first adopters of open roaming. This was a hospital, and here you can see this is the day-to-day connection rate. And you know why the day-to-day connection rate was down here? Because customers hate portals. The number one complaint in connecting to Wi-Fi is the portal. So number one complaint. Here they turned on open roaming. Just connected. Customers love it. Now, we can discuss, it's a different topic. We can just, well, how do I advertise? How do I give them information and things like that? There's ways of doing it. You can still redirect. That's another conversation. But the idea here is how do we make this ubiquitous? Because if we're going to be moving, if we really want to solve the 5G Wi-Fi interoperability, then that means that you always have to be able to connect to all networks that are available to you all the time. And then you need to be able to apply what I call intelligent path selection to determine, do I go to the Wi-Fi path or do I go to the 5G path? Now, we're already doing some intelligent path selection. If those of you that have iPhones, have you seen the feature on your iPhone in the settings that says Wi-Fi Assist? Do you know what Wi-Fi Assist does? It says that if I'm not getting a good Wi-Fi experience, go ahead and go to 5G. So the devices are already catching on to this. Now, most of the time they prefer Wi-Fi over 5G, but you can actually tell it to go ahead and go to 5G if you're not on a good Wi-Fi. Anybody been on a bad Wi-Fi? It happens. It happens, right? So these are some of the benefits, you know, when we get to the attach rate. So can we roam with the government? So this is something that we're currently discussing with the FCC right now, where we're talking about doing 911 services or emergency services. I think over here is at 999. So I think different countries have different, it's different depending on the country you're in. But the idea here is that if you have the capability to do open roaming, then what you can do is if say you're in a building and you don't have the key, you don't have access to the Wi-Fi network in there, or say you didn't go to the portal to connect to it. Now you're in the center of the building, you're in a place, you're down in the basement, you're not getting the 5G's not getting the penetration. You know, someone falls off a ladder or something, you need to call 911. So because 5G can't reach it, should you not be able to call the emergency service? No, you want to call the emergency service. So what you do is you have an emergency 911 profile that's on your device, and what that profile allows you to do is automatically connect to any Wi-Fi network anywhere in the country for one and only one purpose: to connect to the emergency operator. Open roaming can do that. So now we can start to converge some of the things that we do with governments, some of the things that we do with educational institutions, some of the things that we do with retail, some of the things that we do with healthcare. We can start to converge these things together because it is open roaming. That's what we're looking to achieve. Now guess what? Whoops. If you are out there and you didn't have 5G in the particular location where you were, the responders come for whatever type of emergency that you have, and guess what? They probably can't connect to the 5G either. So what do you have? You have a fireman identity. You have a police force identity. And these identities can also connect to that Wi-Fi network, so they can communicate back to the policeman on the street, or they can communicate back to the hospital and talk to the doctor, right? So these are the types of things that we can integrate by applying something as flexible as open roaming. So again, I just wanted to give you some examples on how you can cross-pollinate these different types of capabilities. Now, talk about resilient. You know, as we start to converge more and more, you know, I'll just continue on emergency services for a second. So we accomplish this thing with 911 calls or emergency service calls, and we're working on this with the FCC right now, but I got to tell you, I talked to over 32 regulators while I was at Mobile World Congress. Every regulator I talked to wanted to do this. Every single one. Because they know, especially in some countries, that 5G is not available everywhere. There's whole towns in Brazil, for example, that are connected through ISPs and are actually accessing all their communications through Wi-Fi. So they want to be able to do this. So this gives you a level of resiliency. Obviously, the 5G has a very good system for 911 calling today. And now what are we doing? What are you seeing on your new iPhones? You're seeing satellite for being able to do that. Now, if we start to converge some of these systems together, then you can benefit from the individual systems. So what does the Wi-Fi system know that the 5G system doesn't know when you make an emergency call? The Wi-Fi system knows exactly where you are. So you make an emergency call inside a building. Built into every Wi-Fi chipset is called this thing called fine timing measurement that can give you location accuracy to a meter or two. If you're triangulating off of towers to figure out where that call is coming from, you might get the right building, you know, approximately. So what we're looking at is, could we, even if the preferred connection is a 5G connection, could we enhance the 5G connection capability to get much better location information based on what the Wi-Fi network is giving you? And so again, we're converging these capabilities, and it's open roaming that's facilitating some of that convergence. All right, so what's privacy? What is privacy? What's a simple, I mean, everyone's talking about it. Everyone says GDPR. Oh no, it's coming. It's in Europe already, starting to happen in the US. So you know what privacy is? Privacy is separating your identity from your activity. Separating your identity from your activity, that's privacy, right? Now, Apple really wanted us to do this. This is the first rendition of privacy. But could you connect to a network using a credential an identity provider gave you without the access network knowing who you were? But it's a valid credential, and they take a credential. The answer is yes. Guys like Bart and Mark, they've implemented this capability where you can anonymously connect, but still have a credential to hit that IDP. So the access network doesn't need to know. Now again, the access network owns the network, so it can decide. It can say, I'll take an anonymous identity, or I will not take an anonymous identity. But the capability of doing it is there. And again, for companies like Cisco, companies like Apple, where we believe privacy is a fundamental right, we want to be able to facilitate that. And then what we'll do is we'll let the ecosystem grow into when you decide to give your identity and when you decide not to give your identity. Now what's new, and Bart's going to yell at me for showing this slide so early. This is something that's happening at the WBA. So if the access network doesn't need to know who you are to authenticate, does the IDP need to know who you are? And you can say, well, wait a minute, the IDP gave you the credential. Doesn't that mean that they know who you are? Well, we're working on a technology that will in fact abstract that, such that you could get a valid credential so that when you authenticate into that identity provider, the identity provider wouldn't know who you were. They would know that you're in their system. So in other words, if I was using an AT&T credential, what would happen is that you'd go to the AT&T HSS, and AT&T would say, yes, authenticate this person. They would know I was a customer, but they wouldn't know that it was Matt. So you could even abstract the IDP. Right? This is very powerful stuff. So not only can we connect all of these things together, we can implement layers of privacy that actually facilitate exactly what's trying to be done in the industry to maintain the capability of abstracting it. So good traction. We're seeing a lot of different players in here that are working on the technologies. I'll do a little plug for WBA. If you want to figure out how to do privacy with open roaming, come on out to WBA because we're building it. You know, if you want to figure out some of the new mechanisms, come out to WBA. The work groups are building it. And so it's really starting to happen, and we're starting to see this. We're starting to generate the mass. Everyone says, oh, it's a US technology. Well, look at, we're starting to generate mass in other areas as well. In fact, I think I have another map that shows it more complete. So you see it's starting to spread across. It did start here. It's starting to spread across. Now again, the more of these green dots that appear, the more gravity you produce, and the more people want to be part of the federation, and this thing is just going to grow on its own. And we're starting to do this, right? So this is the happening thing now in the access industry. All right, we see a lot of different customers implementing it. So I just show this because I think it's important to show it's real. So it's happening in real places. So look, open roaming solves a real problem. There's pull. The industry wants to be able to automatically onboard. You saw the attach rates go up by 300 to 400%. So if you really want to understand the traffic patterns, if you really want to understand how many people are coming through your venue, if you really want to understand those types of analytics, get them attached. It forms whole new roaming relationships that whole new businesses can be built on. So totally flexible. And we're getting to the point where we're generating that mass and gravity, and we're seeing new applications like emergency services. So with that, I'll wrap up, and with that overview.
Thank you, Matt. Any question? Dean, another one. So microphone is coming then, just 1 minute.
Oh, it's Dean. I got to run. I'll be right back.
The emergency services one was really interesting, but more generally, are you engaging with regulatory authorities about open roaming more broadly as a way to essentially help countries meet their coverage goals or environmental targets, this sort of thing? It strikes me that that's a potentially interesting area to drive.
No, absolutely, because it depends on what country you're talking about. But when we talk with some of the regulators, like in Africa, when we talk to some of the regulators down in South America, I gave Brazil as an example earlier. You know, why is it that Brazil has 12,000 ISPs? They have 12,000 ISPs. You know, this isn't the only reason, but part of the reason is that because 5G doesn't reach everywhere, because they have very mountainous terrain. So they have these ISPs, and so then they bring in the service, and then what they do is they distribute with Wi-Fi, right? So they're super interested in this. When we started talking about doing emergency services with location capability with some of these regulators, they were like, can I buy that now? So that's, yeah, no, I think it is. It's, there's countries that are very interested in this.
Yeah. Let me just add one more thing. Another area that we are getting quite a lot of interest from regulators is using open roaming for communities that they don't have any IT skills. So they don't know even to select a Wi-Fi network or select one SSID. And what open roaming gives to them is a tool that the device is connected. The user doesn't need to do anything, just play with the device. There was another question here. Yes.
Hi. I'm having 2 questions, if I may. First one is, you showed the lovely map with those green dots. And my question is, because in my country there was no green dot. So the question is, what needs to happen so there's a green dot in my country? Should we, as the operator, do something about it? That's the first question. And the second is, should we, as the operators, be like supportive or kind of afraid of it? Because the more customers are on Wi-Fi, the less data they consume on our network, so there is less monetization, right?
So here's the thing. We've talked to a lot of operators, and I think initially they were afraid. But I think what's happening is that there's this realization that with open roaming, you can literally densify the access network, increase your capacity, and over 80% of the time, these access networks don't even want to be paid. They're just looking to get people connected while they're in their venue. So it's a very economical way to not only get building penetration, but to actually get additional capacity. So yeah, I think it's a matter of, if you want to do it as an operator, this is very easy to set up. There was a second, or? Oh, okay, so. Yeah. All right.
Okay, no more questions, Matt. Once more, thank you.
All right.
Well done. Okay, next speaker is Maria Cuevas, Networks Research Director at BT and member of the board of WBI. Welcome, Maria.
Right. Good morning. Thanks for having me. As Thiago said, I work in BT. I look after our network infrastructure research unit, and I'm very proud to be a board member with the WBA. This is a topic that we discuss a lot, actually, as part of the WBA, but also more widely across the industry. It's not a new thing, and I would like to say progress has been made. We'll be covering some of that. But before I dive into solution mode, perhaps, or the things that need to be addressed, I always like to take the viewpoint from the customer perspective. So that's where I would like to begin. Our customers, obviously our business in telecoms is built out of our volumes, and the starting point tends to be our consumer market. That's where we gain volume, both for the network equipment side, as well as for the devices that we all carry in our pockets. But increasingly, of course, and you probably all of you remember, even from the early days of 5G, enterprise has become a much bigger opportunity for us to focus on. Our residential customers continue to be super important, but how can we do more to address the needs of the enterprise segment. That's where we see the opportunity. And I would just like to highlight some of the characteristics, increasing characteristics of enterprise customers that we believe we need to do more about addressing in the telecoms market. So our customers move a lot, okay? And to be honest, customers are made of people, whether it's employees or whether it's their own customers that they're trying to serve. None of us work in a specific fixed location anymore. We work from home, we work from the office, we work on the train, we work on the move. So having connectivity immediately available where you need it, when you need it, is absolutely key. We want simplicity, ease of use, access that is completely seamless, and access that is ubiquitous and consistent wherever you go. If you look into, and obviously enterprises come in different sizes here, and I'm showing the port of Tyne because it's one of our most recent announced 5G private network solutions. This is actually a port that is becoming a smart port, and that is a great challenge for an enterprise of that size. It's a great challenge and a big opportunity as well for them. They're completely transforming their enterprise into effectively what they call a smart port. And they use technology to automate everything that they do, to improve the operations across the site, to improve the security and the safety of their staff, and to serve, again, their customers and work with the rest of their supply and customer chain in a much more digital manner. And for all of that, they need connectivity. They need connectivity, wireless connectivity that is reliable. These are mission-critical services for them. These are business-critical services for them. Their business does not run if we don't provide the reliability that they deserve, the security in their communications, which is super key. And again, being there on demand when you need it, and most importantly, delivering outcome-driven solutions to that enterprise. They don't care so much about what technology we provide. What they care about is the business outcomes. So reliability, security, and outcome-driven solutions would be my second highlight for what our customers need from us. And again, with that transformation comes business transformation. Businesses transform not just in the way they operate, but in the way their commercial models are driven. Actually, one of the hot topics of the week has been network APIs. We have heard a lot about APIs this week, which is a great thing and not a new thing either. And it's good to see that there is a lot of progress across industry to make our networks more open. We also hear about Open RAN. We hear about open networks all of the time. And it's not just hearing about it, it's actually making it happen in the way we implement our networks. So making sure that the way we implement our technologies is open, is interoperable, and it doesn't just actually plug and play boxes from a single vendor or a single solution. It's actually enabling us to integrate our connectivity with the end-to-end workflow, again, to drive those business outcomes that I was referring to. So we have as-a-service models, and we're growing very much in that space. As I always say, an API is just a way to expose a capability, but what we need to think about is building capabilities which are modular and programmable and can be consumed and integrated in different ways. API just happens to be one of the tools or the ways of doing that. So again, trying to help our customers evolve their commercial models, evolve the way they interact with their own customers, and addressing much more the B2B2C side of commercial models is absolutely key for the growth of our industry. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about what our customers expect from us. If you look at the supply side of the story, it's not a grim picture, but it's not a perfect one either. Industry standards and technology providers specifically come with different solutions. You can see a lot of fragmented technologies that might address part of your problem, but not your entire range of use cases. And again, as I was saying, we should be looking more at offering integrated solutions rather than fragmented technologies to solve specific parts of the issue. I will come back to cellular and Wi-Fi, and obviously that's very prominent in this week's conference, and I'll talk a little bit more about how those parallel tracks and those two industries, which still remain pretty much separate industries, have evolved and where the opportunities lie ahead of us. If you go into Internet of Things, very much very similar to the earlier story. Probably too many options out there to address different types of solutions. And when you look at it from a customer perspective, the response that we always or consistently get is, "I am confused. What should I go for? How can I have something that is future-proof, that is going to serve my future needs, and not just a subset of my current problems today?" The whole generational upgrade, and you will have heard a lot about how operators, including ourselves, are insisting that these 10-year cycles are starting to become a little bit unhealthy, is from the perspective of actually what is the customer viewpoint on that. Should I wait for the next generation before I actually deploy my next big investment? Because of course these things don't come cheap. Or should I deploy what it is right now, and then am I going to have to upgrade my devices? That is something we absolutely need to avoid. You know, introducing so much hype on the next generation or what is coming next, where we're giving the impression to customers that what they have or what we are able to offer today may not be good enough. And actually, in most cases, it is actually good enough for what they need. So we should just avoid falling into that trap. What else? Should I, again, as a customer, go and make my decisions based on the devices that I want to use? And again, remember that in an example like smart ports, we're talking about hundreds of use cases of the types of services and things that they want to do. So should I use my solution based on the devices that I want to use? Should I base it on the network technology that one particular solution provider is offering me? Again, confusion tends to come to mind when you start to be given so many technology choices which are not so much about outcomes, but they can be about positioning your technology. And last but not least, it's important to think of, and coming back to this 10-year cycles refresh model, that customers don't necessarily operate or align with our cycles. They have their own businesses to run, and their cycles are totally different to what we, as an industry, how we operate. So we really need to make sure that we adapt to them rather than asking them to adapt to our own business cycles. Yeah, and cellular versus Wi-Fi, I'm sure this is no news to anybody. It's one of those, charts that you borrow from the internet that show the different technologies and how they have evolved over the last few decades. It's interesting to see actually how they're coming together a lot more closely in terms of, if I, for instance, talk about the reliability, and knowing, of course, that Wi-Fi being primarily an unlicensed spectrum technology had always been seen as a little bit less predictable, less reliable. It's actually super impressive to see the evolution of Wi-Fi and how that reliability and that predictability has improved dramatically over the years. And what it used to be more of a self or an unplanned technology has now become a much more managed service technology, and we obviously see a lot of managed enterprise solutions happening, and we have heard a lot about them this week. So they've both evolved in terms of the data rates that they provide. They've evolved in terms of the capacity and the number of connected devices that you can support. I've talked about reliability and predictability. They are both increasingly capable of offering tailored connectivity to the needs of different use cases and different services, which is obviously super important, as I said, to the needs of our enterprise customers. And the ability, again, to differentiate, distinguish between different types of traffic, the needs of the different use cases, and again, tailor the solutions towards them. So it's just very interesting when you put them side by side and see that evolution, to see how they are actually converging more than people might think. And of course, it's been a lot of effort, and not only in the standards, but operators like ourselves adopting a lot of the convergence or the opportunity actually to bring together these technologies to offer a better service to our customers. These examples are actually more about the residential market, but it's to illustrate, if you like, how by bringing them together in the right way, we can actually deliver tangible benefits. Wi-Fi calling is a really interesting one. After having spent half of my career trying to integrate Wi-Fi calling in different ways, because you would know actually that there have been previous attempts and previous technologies. The latest one, which as many of you would know, is based on some EPDG technologies that 3GPP incorporated into the standards, now give us a very good way to deliver indoor coverage for calling our customers. And you might think, well, people use WhatsApp or over-the-top solutions. But if you're receiving a call on your mobile phone and you're in a place like this, or you're in an airport or in a supermarket where coverage is not so good, you actually want to be able to take that call. So that's what that gives us, our customers. It's a very well used service and very well received by customers today. We also use cellular as a fallback mechanism for our broadband products. Again, if your broadband happens to fail for whatever reason, and there is a myriad of reasons, and we have obviously storms and things that can actually bring the entire fixed network down. If your cellular network is still out there and working, we can actually fall back to the cellular network, and that's a reliability solution, which again customers appreciate. Ideally, they don't even notice that it exists, because that's the whole point actually of making it seamless, that they don't actually know because their service continues to operate. And last but not least, we've also enabled eSIM on a large part of our estate, and this is what we refer to as coverage boost. And at the end of the day, is about telling our customers, you actually have really, really good coverage, including a lot of these locations where your phones can actually seamlessly be authenticated and have access to the Wi-Fi network and continue to receive the services that we provide. Just 3 examples of where things did go well. But of course, there is much more to be done. And just before I conclude, I wanted to touch on three things mostly, starting from the value to the customer. As I said, I started the presentation with the customer needs, and customer centricity is absolutely key to us. I would like to talk a little bit about industry adoption and why have some of the solutions already available in the standards not necessarily been adopted in industry so much. And last but not least, I would like to talk a little bit about how some of this can actually enable market growth. From a value to the customer perspective, some of these I've already touched on, but just to look at it from the perspective of what we need to do to address those issues, our customers want consistency. And again, the part of the being seamless, the being invisible, has to do with that consistency of the quality of experience that I get, or the service level agreements if it comes to some sort of mission critical enterprise service, or the value add services if I happen to have parental controls or some sort of feature or service that my operator provides, need to be consistent across different technologies. Again, people should not care what the little icon in the corner of the screen says. They should get the same experience wherever they are. And that comes with what is the best network that can help me or serve my needs. And this is where we're starting to go into solution mode perhaps, because we see, and I think Matt was talking about intelligent access and path selection earlier, can we actually make the access selection mechanism much more oriented towards what is the quality of the service that the customer needs to get? Things like energy efficiency, which we always forget, or not always, but sometimes forget in this context, which is actually what is the most efficient network to deliver traffic or deliver a service to the customer. What is the reliability that service provides? It's quite interesting actually when you see some solutions out there at the application layer actually duplicating traffic and sending traffic via multiple separate networks to achieve reliability. We should be able to address that problem for them and not have them having to find very expensive solutions if you're having to simultaneously connect to two networks and duplicate all of your traffic. So depending on the needs of the service, we should be able to address the needs in a different way. If I move on to the industry adoption, which is one of these often heard comments, oh, we don't see enough demand, therefore we're not implementing feature X, Y, or Z. And then you hear the operators saying, well, but we cannot implement these solutions because there is no products in the market implementing them. I'm not gonna dive into each of the different options, but as we all know, standards have defined things like non-3GPP access, things like ATSSS to do path selection. I would argue that a lot of them suffer from a number of issues to do with cost. And anything that drives up cost is very difficult to justify. Tunneling is a big issue, and I often refer to it as tunnels over tunnels. We tend to have a lot of those in the architectures, and that's never a good thing because it's just not efficient. It's not efficient from an energy perspective, it's not efficient from a cost perspective, the amount of hardware that you still have to throw in to support tunneling, and with tunneling goes as well encryption again, when there is obviously security involved. And of course encryption is a good thing, and we must continue to secure our traffic, but let's find ways to do that much more efficiently than we do today. We also have a lot of functional duplications, and when you look at some of the architectures that have been proposed in the past, we actually do authentication more than once. We do user plane packet processing more than once. We do policy management multiple times. And again, a lot of that is not good news if you're trying to implement something that is relatively simple, ideally, and cost-effective to implement. And of course, there is the industry support, which goes hand in hand. How do we work more closely with the device vendors to make this happen? And of course, we know that the convergence today happens on the device. That is where you receive your multiple access networks, not to forget increasingly non-terrestrial network access, which Matt also referred to. How do we make sure that the device is actually working with the network or with the information about the quality across the different access network types to make sure that the decision that is taken about the path that the traffic should follow is the right one? I think we need to come together as an industry much more closely to address that particular problem and avoid looking at it from our own perspective without coming together and trying to solve the needs of the customer. There is one more thing I was going to say about actually the cost of implementation, which I think I was debated with some of you yesterday. And it's down to the complexity, inherent complexity in some of our architectures already, because in my mind we have been obsessed with things like seamless handover for too many years, because of course we come from, those of us who come from the cellular world and wanted voice to transition seamlessly and so on. It's still super important, but it's becoming niche. And it's becoming a need for some services, and service continuity will continue to be important for services like voice, but not for all services. So can we actually crack that problem in a way where not everything needs a make before break handover approach, and not everything needs actually service continuity as such. And we can think more about what are the tools that we need to address the different needs of different service types. So that's the last one on industry adoption. And just to finish with, I just wanted to talk about market growth. I did start talking about obviously how our consumer and residential market still continues to drive our volumes and the reason why we exist. But let's continue to think about ways to grow the entire size of the market so that our respective pies of that market are increasingly bigger. And I'll just reiterate some of the things that I said earlier. For me, making sure that things are interoperable and integratable is not just about exposing APIs, it's about building what's underneath the API actually needs to be built in a much more modular way than it has been to date. That should enable on-demand consumption models, and it should improve the way we're able to integrate actually our services into end-to-end workflows. And last but not least, and I've mentioned it already, business model innovation is super key. It's important to us as operators to evolve the way we operate with our customers. It is super important for our customers to find new ways to integrate with their customers and their supply chains. And again, a very, very similar story where we actually see, and working with our customers, we see the way they build their business models, and we should learn actually from what they do in terms of evolving our capabilities. So that was the kind of last thing I was going to say. We have actually been talking quite publicly about our vision for 6G. We believe in a network of networks vision, which some people don't like the term. I don't believe terminology is that important, but it does paint the picture that the world is not one technology or another. It should be about outcomes. And we should be able to address the needs of our customers wherever they are. They should always be best connected. They should get a completely seamless user experience. They should get consistency, and they should get what they need, where they need it. And we should be underpinning new business models and growth for the entire industry. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Any questions from anyone to Maria? Okay, looks like not. Maria, well done. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, so next on the agenda is the Enterprise Connectivity Forum panel discussion. So I would like to invite the participants on the panel to join me here on stage. So Ivan, Mark, Steve, Mital, please join me. Good to see you, Mark. Thank you for coming. Mital. Well, thank you for joining and be part of the panel. I would like to propose that you just introduce yourself very briefly, and we can start by you, Ivan.
So my name is Ivan Muccini. I'm VP of Product of Cloud4Y. And so we are a software company, and we help businesses to provide public Wi-Fi services in their venues with the best user experiences possible, and also helping them to extract some value out of it.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Namus of EM, so I'm VP for our industry partnerships at the Wireless Broadband Alliance. I believe you know who the Wireless Broadband Alliance is, as we're hosting. I work a lot with enterprise organizations, as well as a lot of our operators and OEMs and ODMs, on basically getting them involved in a lot of the sort of the technical programs and events that the WBA runs as well. We have members such as the Home Depot. We also work with hospitality brands such as Marriott, and from a global basis, retailers such as Starbucks and Woolworths as well. So, okay.
Mark Marini from JCDecaux. So I'm in charge of the connectivity business for the group, which are two very different things. One of them is providing infrastructure for telecom operators to densify their networks, installing small cells on bus shelters, big antennas on billboards. And the other part is providing free Wi-Fi for cities as part of the services we offer with bus shelters, to make it very simple.
I'm Mital Parekh. I'm from Ruckus Networks. I'm responsible for product marketing and technical marketing at Ruckus.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So just to do a recap, so the Enterprise Connectivity Forum, in fact, was launched 1 year ago. The objective is to have a platform inside Wireless Broadband Alliance that we can create an ecosystem of different players that can share learnings, discuss enterprise connectivity, of course, what is the role of Wi-Fi on that enterprise. During this year, we managed to start creating that ecosystem. So many of these entities that you see on this slide, either they join WBA as members or they join and participate on the Enterprise Connectivity Forum activity. So we are building that community. If any one of you are not part of the Enterprise Connectivity Forum and you'd like to be, please go to our website. There is different means to be part of the community, and this is open to anyone. It's a completely open platform that anyone can join and be part of it. During this year, we had as well different activities. We ran webinars. We had panel discussions like this one along the year. We try to create activities that are open to any enterprise to be part. And of course, we are open as well to technology demos, proof of concepts, demonstrations of technologies. We are as well part of the Enterprise Connectivity Forum work. Saying this, I wanted to come back to the panel, and big part of the discussions on the Enterprise Connectivity Forum has been about these big words about user experience, how to make user experience for users better and optimize that user experience. But what really means at the end of the day? What is the goal of that user experience? I know, Ivan, if you can start from Cloud4Y perspective and we go through the panel.
Yeah, so we work with mainly consumer-facing businesses, right? So for who customer experience is not just a buzzword, it's actually a priority. And we see it in our own experience working with clients. So ultimately, but talking about customer experience, the interaction also in physical spaces are more and more interconnected with digital interactions that often happens in personal devices through mobile apps, QR codes, or any type of digital interactions. And so in order to make them viable, customers need connectivity. So that's actually where guest Wi-Fi comes in place, right? So guest Wi-Fi is not something that businesses want because everybody to connect to, right? If there is a good indoor 5G connectivity and users can fulfill their digital interactions seamlessly, that's great. But if there is just a small subset of users and customers that cannot fulfill, they cannot complete those interactions, they actually complain. And those complaints brings bad reputation, and no business nowadays can afford to risk reputation because it's extremely expensive to achieve. So also when it comes to the guest Wi-Fi per se, right, providing the service, we work with businesses to make it happen, and the #1 priority is customer experience, even more than security, because ultimately, most users are not even aware of the security risk of open networks, so nobody really complains. Who is aware of that doesn't even use guest Wi-Fi, so they don't complain about it. But those that have a bad experience on Wi-Fi, they get pure like speed or complex onboarding experience, they complain, and that's bad for businesses, right? So we even seen businesses in the past years just getting rid of their captive portals and just staying with an open SSID to remove any possible friction from the users. Because captive portals are becoming increasingly tedious, right, for users. And so that proves that really customer experience is a priority. And every business is out there is looking for ways to improve the customer experience, also when it comes to connectivity, and to let the users really enjoy those digital experiences they need in physical spaces, stores, and venues.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that sort of come to mind. I mean, if you look at the high street, if you look at malls, whatever, you can see that over the last 25 years, certainly in the UK, and I've seen it in the US, that competition is increasing. So a lot of those traditional retailers, some of them that have been around for 100 years, are no more. You've got online platforms, e-commerce platforms that they now have to compete with, let alone just competing on the high street. So connectivity, I believe, is an important way in which a lot of those retailers can basically compete with each other, but also differentiate and offer a personalized service. So I agree with what Ivan's saying, is that, okay, if I go into a retail store, and it's not my favorite thing to do, over the last 25 years of when Wi-Fi has been around, my shopping habits have become sort of increasingly more online. Going around a mall is not my idea of fun, but if I'm going to do it, I want that interaction to be seamless from when I have to park the car and use my phone, going into a mall, losing coverage, going into a store, booking the restaurant, whatever. If I can have a seamless connectivity somehow, that's going to make that journey a bit more sort of enjoyable as well. It's also an expectation. So consumers expect the quality of the Wi-Fi. They expect Wi-Fi to be there. So it's a generational thing. My son is 10 years old, and when he flies, it's not a question about is there Wi-Fi. He expects there to be Wi-Fi on that plane. So the Wi-Fi has to be there. It has to be of a certain quality. It has to be seamless, and that's the expectation. And I believe if we look at, say, certain industry verticals, we've seen this probably play out more first in hospitality brands who have been dealing with this issue for the last 20 years, and I believe still are dealing with this issue right now.
Mark?
Well, in our case, it's a bit complex, I would say, because we are dealing first with cities and dealing with their expectations. So we are providing services on behalf of the cities based on a public tender. So they're asking for Wi-Fi in the streets, and most of the time, this is just a basic request. That's asking for Wi-Fi. Maybe they will ask for 50 meters coverage, but they're not asking of what kind of usage there will be for the end user, for the citizens. So that's something we need to work with them to try to align the service we're going to provide with the backhaul we're going to have in the streets. Do not expect to have hundreds of megabytes per user, because this would be too expensive to bring that to the street. We cannot bring fiber connectivity on each bridge shelter. And then also there is this will of, let's say, the cities to find a way to communicate about the service, how good they are in providing something. And also they want to use the Wi-Fi as a way to communicate with people. So the landing page in that case is something that is still important. This is a discussion we had a few times. That's they want the users to be facing a landing page as often as possible to get an opportunity to communicate with them, to provide information, to do queries, to understand what are the expectations of the people in the streets. And on the other side, people just want to have free internet access, and that's it. Just want to be bothered about anything. They want it to be free, they want it to be open, they want it to be endless. And this is the balance we need to have. We're having a conversation now. We started the service in Colombia, in Bogota, and the request from the city is to offer 10 minutes connectivity per day. And we have fiber connectivity on each bridge shelter. So we're telling them, okay, we have no reason to get this kind of limitation, because at the end of the day, the user is getting connected, getting frustrated, and not reconnecting to the system. So we should open the gate to make it more open and to align the expectation from the end users with, let's say, the political communication expectations. And this is what we have to mitigate. And this is a challenge for us, with, of course, different views when you are in Europe and when you are in other countries.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Mital?
So, we are Ruckus Networks. We stand for delivering the best end user experience. Let's start with a simple show of hands. How many of you booked your hotel this time and looked for Wi-Fi connectivity or connectivity experience rating? Okay. Now ask the same question to your kids or your teenage kids, wherever, right? You will notice one thing, that while probably this generation looks for secure, good locality, clean hotel rooms, the next generation is first looking at how good is the connectivity. And industries are catching up with that. We stand for purpose-driven networks. We are well aligned with industries such as hospitality, retail, so on and so forth. And one of the things we can tell you that getting better connectivity, offering better connectivity experience is becoming a differentiator. What does that tell you? That it's not going to be, if it is going to happen, it's just a matter of when it is going to be the first line in the list of things that people are going to consider, right? And so what's in it for business owners or industry verticals, retails and hospitality? They could use that to differentiate themselves and charge a premium. Nobody is Mother Teresa here, right? We all are doing this to make money. How about making money while delivering the best end user experience? That's what open roaming is all about.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mital. So now that we have an idea of what is the good end user experience, let's talk about some of the friction points that exist. So I'd like to start with a very hot topic on MAC rotation, MAC address rotation. So how is that MAC randomization is impacting the guest Wi-Fi experience from your perspective?
Well, one of the issues is the reporting we have to deliver to cities, which is returning users. And this is something they want to know, is that what is the level of adoption of the service that I have? Because somehow they have to justify politically that they are delivering a service that is efficient or not.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to say, okay, how many users do I have every day? Are those users visitors, or are those people that are commuters that I'm having every day? And this is a challenge that we have, so this is something we have to communicate. The biggest system we have are in Latin America on bus shelters, so the idea for them is to know how many commuters are using the system daily. And is this efficient? And so with MAC randomization, the issue we have is how can I keep on recognizing people if I don't have a way to do that? And today, we're just having people to click, so they get to the login page, and we're just identify them through the MAC address.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an issue for us.
Yeah. Steve, I know that you were in a hospitality event recently, so what is your feeling from the hospitality community on the MAC rotation issue?
Yeah, Thiago said I was attending an event in the UK last week, HTNG, so they're one of our liaison partners. And this is actually the most widely talked about topic. So I ran a session on connectivity. And certainly this is where I think a lot of the brands particularly are reeling and trying to sort of find some solutions and mitigating factors. Certainly, I think looking at alternative ways to authenticate guests onto their networks is perhaps part of the reasons why we're seeing sort of RFPs coming out from some of the brands, and some of them actually have started to roll out Passpoint in the United States as an alternative way to authenticating the guests on the network as well. It's a big part of what we do in the WBA. So the program management office that we have has assembled a Tiger team to work with the OS vendors. We've had great contributions from our friends here at Google and Apple. And we plan to share that work with the industry as well, just to, as we believe it's becoming less of a reliable method to authenticate guests. There are other ways that we can leverage, and the technology does exist as well.
Any thoughts, Ivan?
Yeah, I mean, MAC randomization has been among us for a while, and it came for a good reason, honestly. We need to agree. And there is a gap in the standard. We are broadcasting MAC addresses in clear. It's like publishing my home address in these slides. It's exactly the same thing from the privacy standpoint. And so as the devices and vendors, they came up with their own solution to attempt to mitigate this privacy gap. Unfortunately, of course, captive portals are relying on MAC addresses to recognize returning devices and provide a smoother onboarding experiences. So this is impacting a lot of industries, especially those where the customer base visit frequently, right? Because now MAC addresses change over time, periodically. Now, like Apple changes every 2 weeks. It might get even more frequent in the future, and when it gets to 24 hours, we'll disrupt completely also the hospitality industry, where you stay at the hotel, and every day you need to get re-onboarded, re-authenticated. So the impact is substantial, and we've seen, especially in this period where there's been some changes, some new releases from operating systems that have enhanced the randomization mechanism. We never had so many inquiries from our clients and from prospects from the market about solutions to solve and mitigate this problem, right? And honestly, the only future-proof solution that we have to transition to is passpoint-based connectivity. That's why we are heavily invested in looking for ways to democratize the use of this technology, starting from open roaming or empowering brands to onboard the users. So we provide them IDP services or SDKs to install passpoint profiles into their apps. We need to start this journey, and we are here to help, right? Accommodate this transition. It's not going to happen in one day. Maybe we're going to stay in this randomization stage for a few more months, but we hope that next year we're going to see more adoption of Passpoint in general across all verticals, especially in consumer-facing businesses. Yeah.
Correct. Any thoughts, Mittal, from your side?
Lots of them. So here's the thing, right? Let's understand, why do we need, or why did they put MAC randomization in place? The first word that comes to mind, and it's printed, privacy, right? It's being able to identify a user. So when we try to remain ahead of the curve when we see these kind of trends. And why do I say that? Over the past 1.5 years, we've been following this 2 years, and you see several blogs on our website where we talk about impact of MAC randomization. And now I can say that we have not 1, 2, 3, we have 4 ways in which you can overcome that. Not that we want to breach user privacy, but if you as a business, you really want to identify a user, you can still do it, right? There are technologies out there ahead of the curve. For example, dynamic pre-shared key. I'm not going to go into technology mumbo jumbo, but the point here is this, right? Once you identify a given device with proprietary identification, does not matter once you associate that. Let the MAC address change every 2 weeks, every Monday. When the Wi-Fi SSID changes, doesn't matter. We have ways and means of using AI and ML to study the user pattern in those 1 week or 1 day or what have you, in order to tag that, and so on and so forth. So friends, look, here's the thing, right? It's been solved. The identifying the user, if that's the end goal, that has already been solved. If you want to talk about it, we can do it after this.
No, that's an interesting angle, because it has been solved, but so why the industry is not moving faster on somehow moving away from MAC address randomization situation? So why not moving away from MAC address authentication faster? Any thoughts on that front? Is there any legacy constraint to move faster than, because like Ivan said, MAC randomization is around for almost 10 years when it started to be discussed on the industry.
I can go first. Look, here's the thing, right? It takes a lot of time to bring change in everybody's head. It's not about changing technology. We can bring that change overnight, but the way we think about it, it is entrenched within us that only when I'm able to identify the hardware address and associate that with the user, then I have nailed it, right? So it's a matter of time. No. We do have ways and means to implement today, if everybody agrees to. It's going to phase out the old way of thinking, and the new way will kick in. But our solutions are there already.
Any thoughts from anyone else on what is blocking moving away from MAC address authentication? Steve?
Yep, I'll go back to hospitality, and it's a complex ecosystem. So if you look at how a hotel is run, you have the corporate IT, you have the local IT, you have the GM, you have real estate investment companies, you have property management companies. Marriott itself, I believe it's 4,500 hotels globally. I think the biggest one is Wyndham. So it's a complex operation. to say that we're going to basically just roll out Passport across 7,000 hotels globally or 4,500 hotels globally with that number of stakeholders, does it require an investment, for example, in the infrastructure? We were speaking with one of our members last night, Panasonic Aviation, that does in-flight connectivity. So it's difficult because, for example, a lot of the planes right now don't have Passport technology in. Now, does the airline want to take a plane out to refurbish it, put Wi-Fi 7 APs on there? What does that cost them to take a plane out? It's very expensive, and that's not something they want to do. Can they do that remotely? So it's a complex operation and thing to do, as well as requires potentially some level of investment as well.
Okay. Well, so moving past MAC addresses as a way to recognize users means basically moving away from CATI portals, because CATI portals works in this way, and as long as MAC address rotates, users are going to see CATI portals all over, right? So that means transitioning to other technologies. And in the realm of guest Wi-Fi, or in general unmanaged devices, right, there are not many other alternative technologies. One is DPSK, right, for sure, in MDU context, where there is a process for onboarding and delivering PPSK to users, especially for connecting headless devices. And the other one is Passpoint. But the challenge that kind of slows down this transition are, from one end, we have the technologies, we have the standards, we have a toolbox of things, but we don't see yet, let's say, an harmonized adoption and implementation of these technologies across the ecosystem players that needs to adopt them, from the handset devices to your networks and so on. And on the other hand, we need to work with brands to evangelize and bring them other business models that they can put in place to replace what they were getting from CATI portals. Like Mark was saying, it's very important from City to get a portal, to interact, to sponsor, to monetize somehow. Well, if portals goes away, we need to bring alternatives that are based on the foundation of Passpoint, but they still can deliver those outcomes to who invest in the network and in these services. So, there are technologies. It's just a matter of creating the conversations to create the business models now.
Yeah, and it's a complex ecosystem. So we have different players involved, not only the device manufacturers, infrastructure, the customers, everyone. Any thoughts, Mark, from your side?
Yeah, as you said, one of the challenges for us it's the request from the city to have the ability to communicate with the users, and I believe there is also the trust and the regulation issue. Yes. The trust from the user to connect to Wi-Fi in the street is who I'm connecting to, and the fact that there is the name of the city, everything, the brand, so the people are reassured that they are connecting to a Wi-Fi that they can trust. So that's one way to do it. And on the other hand, there is the regulation for the one providing the service, which is how can I identify users. So you have the obligation to keep track of the technical data for a period of time, but now this data is useless. Yeah. Because you cannot find back who was the user based on that. So we're keeping the data for 1 year just to be sure that if we have some requests from the police, so we can release the data and give them information, but this information now is useless. So we have to see what will be the impact on the regulation of what information we have to keep when we offer public Wi-Fi in the street. And we know that asking users to give them an email, whatever, it's going to be very bad information at the end of the day, useless. And having strong authentication is something that we cannot afford. So the idea is to find the balance between this, to find a way to identify properly the users in kind of, because of the regulation, because we have to keep track of that. And on the other hand, have the ability still to communicate with the users. So this is the way. So one way would be the application. There might be different ways to do it, but clearly we'll have to change that. And it would take some time to identify for us the proper way to do it, especially when you have a contract that is running for 10 years and you have to modify a public contract. It's not that simple.
Yeah. It's a complex topic. It's a very complex topic. Let me bring a different topic now. So yesterday, the word more used on the presentation was AI. I would like to get your views on what it means, AI, for guest Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi. Is there an angle that we see an impact there? Anyone? Mital, you want to start?
If you ask me, I'll not stop. So logic is very simple. Wi-Fi experience, delivering the best Wi-Fi experience is not optional. If you start from that thought process, then we discussed yesterday, AI is becoming almost a mandatory technology to bring in. You want incidents from becoming service affecting. You want to avoid those from becoming service affecting to start with. AI is able to, as I mentioned yesterday, optimize your network so that you can probably pack more users, more devices, or maybe provide better throughput per device, so on and so forth. So benefits go on and on and on. The idea is simple, that it is humanly impossible to manage your Wi-Fi network, deliver the best guest experience without AI. That's what we think.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anyone?
Yeah, I agree. I think the AI component is really important in terms of network management and also trying to sort of give good network insights to enterprises, to operators, to understand what's happening in the network. So we've seen a lot of investment, and there are a lot of organizations, here at NetworkX that have built or are building solutions that can provide enterprises, operators with better network insights, and then to add to that, how to take preventative measures to stop the network sort of falling over. So whatever that is, if that requires a reset on the router, is that something that can be done remotely? All of that stuff, I believe, is really sort of, it's going to lead to a better sort of customer experience, so it takes us back to where we started. If you can start to sort of do things like that, sort of diagnostics and fault finding, and then even sort of preventative maintenance as well. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any question from the audience to the panel? Anyone? Okay, no. So one final question, and we are running out of time. So where do you see guest Wi-Fi in 3 years from now? And maybe I can start with you, Ivan.
Well, yesterday I started my presentation sharing my journey coming here and how many connected to hotspots and share my data with who knows who and accepted privacy policies everywhere. I hope in 3 years to come here and have a smooth connectivity wherever I go and leverage the open roaming framework, right, to get seamlessly connected to these networks whenever I need it, whenever I want it, and being in control of the ownership of my data and being, in control of it. So again, we have the standards, the frameworks like open roaming, the toolkits, things like Cupboard that might becomes better and help us to create this exchange of value that businesses are looking for in order to deploy open roaming. So we have all the ingredients. Now we need to cook them in something that is viable. I think in the next 3 years, it's enough long time frame to be able to evangelize these business models and help enterprises digest them, experiment them, and make them see that there is different ways to achieve what they want by delivering a better customer experience and preserving those outcomes that they're looking for. I think it's 3 years ago is a good time frame.
Let's join forces and bring everyone together. Steve, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's seamless. So whatever sort of venue I'm in, whatever transit or journey that I'm on, I want it to be seamless. Okay, and I also want it to be secure. So I think that's really important for user trust. If we're on the road but we need to do banking or anything else that requires sensitive use of my sensitive information, I do want it to be secure as well. The technology is there. We've talked about already Passport, open roaming. We're dealing with issues such as map randomization. Hopefully we're coming out of the other end in that. I think we'll be on Wi-Fi 8, Wi-Fi at that time as well. So it'll be even faster, be able to handle more traffic as well. So.
Thank you. Mark?
I have no idea. It would depend on what we find in public tenders, I would say. And usually they are 5 years late of anything, so it's really a challenge. Though basically we were still focusing on how to bring the best possible connectivity in the street. And this is a challenge because we are mainly relying on 4G, 5G connectivity on that, and this is the most challenging we have is to have reliable connectivity on the street at an affordable price. The rest, I would say, the expectation we have from end users is still the same. They want free internet in the street. That's it.
Yeah.
So the way you do it, they don't care. They want trusted and easy connectivity.
Yeah, thank you. Mital.
So if we are to draw promised land, so to speak, in guest Wi-Fi, then I want to paint a visual, right? Right now, when you talk about seesaw, there are only 2 ends. This seesaw has probably 5 or 6 ends. There are multiple stakeholders. I think we are fast approaching a point where there is something for everybody in it. While end users like you and me, we get the best Wi-Fi experience. When used, for example, everybody benefits. Right now, nobody is overburdened just so that you get the best Wi-Fi experience. I think the playing field is leveling. It will continue to level, and I think in future, it will be a win-win-win situation for all stakeholders. I think that's where the thing is going.
Yeah, thank you, Mital. So, round of applause to our panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll now break for a coffee break, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Al Jenkins. I serve as the WBA co-chair of its Connected Communities Forum. In this session of the WBA conference, we're here to discuss the topic of connecting communities Wi-Fi and empowerment of the underserved. So in this session, we'll hear from 3 guest speakers and follow with 4 panelists. Our guest speakers include Daryl Clark from Incapto, followed by Sean Seeley from Fusion Tech, followed by Giovanni Guerri from Guillermo. Our panel will then be joined by David Wilkins, the City of Westminster, as well as Mattel Parikh from Ruckus Network. In the panel, we'll discuss some topics here in this particular session on how to specifically identify the underserved, particularly in more urban and suburban environments, Wi-Fi security issues, particularly in public Wi-Fi networks, as well as Wi-Fi networks in which may or have been converged for greater coverage and ubiquity, maintaining power sources to Wi-Fi networks in more rural and utility-scarce environments, challenges of affordability in Wi-Fi environments where there may be already 1 or 2 incumbents, but little take rate. And can municipalities support subsidizing those unserved or unconnected to close the digital divides? Question mark. That's been a big question for a lot of municipalities for different areas to solve closing digital divides by being able to subsidize either infrastructure and or end-user equipment to underserved environments. So with this, I'd like to invite our first guest speaker, Mr. Daryl Clark.
Thank you, Al. Well, morning everyone. Great week in Paris, except for the rain. I hope I'm not the only one with wet feet up here still. So, all right, I'll find my way. I'll point to 2. I hope there's no cats in the room. I want to talk today about driving the digital inclusion in First Nations communities. I'll give you a little background on who we are. We're based out in Melbourne, Australia. In around 2005, I started a company called EasyWeb Digital. It's been designing and managing public Wi-Fi networks since the iPhone, or the God phone, turned up, as we used to call it back then. You know, certainly an early pioneer of public Wi-Fi back in the day. But, you know, was especially really passionate about remote communities. Most of our work is government-based, and, you know, we deploy that. We'll get more to that. Now, in Capto, the other piece is a software company. It's a captive portal company originally. It's now, you know, advancing through, just allowing people to deploy massive Wi-Fi networks at scale. We started it around 10 years ago because we were buying radius servers and software and trying to jumble it all together and make a difference for our customers. And with our struggles there and the scale we're seeing, we started that software company. Today, it does Wi-Fi networks. We have Wi-Fi networks all over, Paris, Ontario, you know, remote parts of Australia, of course, Africa and across India. But there's no sale there, so here's what I'm going to want you to talk about. You know, I've heard some great talks over the Congress, a lot of innovation going on. You know, Wi-Fi's in great hands, clearly. You know, some air ties measuring, you know, user experience, using AI and ML. Matt McPherson talking about, you know, HFCL talking about the innovations in Wi-Fi 7, fantastic. You know, increased spectrum, right? 6 gigahertz coming along, all wonderful. Loads of great initiatives. But I just want to go back to basics here, right? I want to go back in time to the land that time forgot. We are, of course, talking about modern day Australia. Now, more specifically, I want to talk about modern day communities in Australia, very remote communities, Indigenous communities, First Nations communities. Now, it's worth noting that Australia is the 13th largest economy by GDP, right? So, you know, we're hardly a third world country. So, but, you know, this is what we're dealing with geographically. This is a typical First Nations community. It's called a kunji in local speak, but, you know, Haas Bluff in colonial speak. It's a really typical First Nations community, you know, low number of houses, you know, quite remote, we'll get to that. It's got no mobile coverage. There's no cellular here, right? It just doesn't have a telecommunications network, and it's probably never going to get one. Low population. There's about 1,500 or so communities like this around Australia. I just want to show you how remote it is. So, not seeing any major places yet. No freeways, huh? No roads. Uluru, Ayers Rock's not far from there, actually. You know, that's where it is. Okay, 1,500 communities like this in and around Australia. And, you know, the notion of I'm popping into town, right, is like getting in your car and driving from here to Rome, right? And the only difference is there's probably 2 towns along the way and 3 petrol stations, which you stop at each one, of course, right? So, you know, how do you go see a doctor? Right? How do you go do the things you need to do? Right? Well, you know, that's why we have e-government and, you know, services like that. You know, so it's almost impossible to get stuff done. Now, Tiago, you tell me your bank balance? Don't tell me. You can trust me. You can't trust this lot, but you can tell me your bank balance. I know you can. Don't tell me, but you've got, right? Howie, do you know why your credit card's not working? No idea. Right. Well, but you can find out, right? Pretty quickly. You know, Happens to me all the time. We hear a lot of stories, right? We hear stories of people walking for a day to go into town, maybe hitching along the way, just to go into town to check their bank balances, right? That's what we have, right? And then they get there, check their bank balance, and work out, okay, and then off they go, back to community, right? It's almost impossible today to participate in society, right, without having internet access. It's just an absolute basic need. So, talking about digital inclusion, what is digital inclusion? Can we measure it? What's the gap, right? Now, when we talk about it, digital inclusion is really accessibility, right, affordability, and ability. Triple A. Does that ring a bell? So, accessibility, are you able to get online? Do you have A, internet, and B, do you have a device to use it on it? So, affordability, what's the cost of this? Is it within your means? And then ability, how digitally literate are you, right? And then the second part is, can we measure it? Well, what is the gap, right? Well, we can, and these are some of the stats that you'll see from a project called Mapping the Digital Divide. It's run out of the ARC Centre for Excellence, right, an automated decision-making society. So, they can look at this and they can make decisions. And it's, funded by Telstra, I should mention as well, our big telco in Australia. So, we talk about gap. Gap to me is something you can squeeze through, maybe, right? Or, lets in a little bit of light. It's not a gap, is it? It's a chasm. It's enormous, right? Massive, massive challenges in these. And, I'll run through some of them. Only 2% have fixed home internet, right? We have loads of internet. We have our own satellites in the sky delivering 100 megabit internet. We have, the LEOs as well. But only 2% have fixed home internet, right? There's no fibre running to these communities, obviously. Only 90% of phone owners are on 90% of phone owners are on a prepaid plan, right? There's a high preference for prepaid in the communities, and that probably explains the 2% that have fixed home, right? You can't get prepaid home. 43% of these communities have no mobile service. So, out of these 1,500 communities, they have no mobile, no cellular service in them. That's because there's like a 900-year ROI for communications providers. So, they're not coming anytime soon. And where communities do have mobile networks, they're under-provisioned. They're unusable for most of the day, and they're expensive, as they're being prepaid, and come with limited data. But when you do have one, they're paying 144 Aussie dollars, which means nothing to you probably, but 90 euros, right? I suspect my phone bill this month, touring around Paris for a week on a roaming charges, will be less than that still. So, that's what we're talking about. And then there's power, right? And Sean's going to talk about power soon. It's really important. The majority of communities use prepaid power meters. We have power, have relatively reliable power from generators out there, but you have to go down the shop. And we hear stories of people that don't have power for a week, several weeks. So even if they had internet, it wouldn't work. 30% of regular users can complete online forms. So that means 70% can't. So we have low digital literacy. So it's something else we can try and fix. Can't fix that just by giving them internet. There needs to be more about that. And as I mentioned, that mobility. They're highly mobile people. They go and play football. They love sport. But it's not nipping to the local, the next suburb to play your local team. When you play your local team here, it's a 300-kilometre drive. It's absolutely enormous, vast distances you have to travel. 55% own or share a mobile phone. Mobile phone is the most popular device in communities. Laptops, they get broken, thrown around, no one has them. So everyone has a mobile phone, and everyone shares their mobile phone. Up to 6 people share a mobile phone in the house. The kids, they give it to the kids, they do that. And this is the worst stat, really, is, more than half of the people surveyed actually make a decision whether to actually go get groceries or have internet access, right? So, a bit of a horror story. But that's why we're really excited about open roaming and the opportunities it brings. When I look at open roaming, I hear loads of great stories, great technology. We're deploying it in the metro stations and we're deploying it in the sports stadiums. Fantastic. All great, but these are well-connected areas already. But what it means for Indigenous communities really is a bit of a game changer. So, it's almost, in my view, the perfect use case, open roaming. Why? Because if we look at these communities, we have typically, pre-open roaming, 3 wireless hotspots. So the community we looked at earlier would have one provided, sponsored by the health department in a community centre. One down the road with the library, the territory library, another one provided by the Department of Social Services. They're all different user experiences. They don't work very well together. So what we're able to do now is just bring all of those into a single access network by deploying open roaming over the top of them. So, captive portals can still stay there if people want to use them. In fact, they're great for onboarding open roaming, especially in remote areas. But what we see is really just that ability of people to connect. And then we're doing it in the next community and the next community. So people are now, moving around their communities and just remaining connected. It brings about massive cost efficiencies. We're not buying extra equipment, we're just deploying a technology that increases the size and capacity of the network. So, that's a really important point. They can then move down into these major centres, and when they go to the major centres, we operate many of the networks there too. So, they just get themselves connected. They go into town, and we're talking to, the e-government service providers who have their traditional bricks and mortar stores, whether they can deploy open roaming on their networks. So just to create that bigger network, that more seamless network as people move around. And we're now starting to deploy significant amounts of throughput into these. We have geostationary from our service provider NBN, our wholesaler in Australia. We've got Starlink. So we're getting 300-400 megabits of connectivity in each of these communities. Massive. Now, in the future, in the near term, we'll start talking with Telstra, who are also launching open roaming. They have their phone boxes. It's just really about building that bigger network. Maybe there'll be commercial opportunities at some point in the future as well with internet service providers to use those networks. We're talking to government about providing connectivity. They have challenges. They wheel in satellites when they go visit these places so they can conduct telehealth calls and things like that. And that makes a big difference where we can then say to them, okay, well, we can provide you with connectivity across the board when you're in and around these communities, and we give you prioritised traffic. So it's just really a fantastic story with open roaming being deployed on there. And these are sort of the outcomes from this. This is the .com mob. Mob's a term they use for the tribes, effectively, right? They call themselves mobs. And, really love that. I spend most of my time trying to get kids off the internet in my house, but, it's very different here. One of the outcomes, the .com mob is an initiative. They just start springing up as internet turns up in town, right? It's really just about lifting digital literacy, enhancing educational outcomes for community, which just ultimately results in social inclusion, economic opportunities, better psychology of the people and their well-being, it's confidence building, enhanced attitudes to learning when they have computers and get online and do all of these things. So, super, super important. You know, even down to just having access to TikTok, right? Now, you know, it's, I'm not a user, but there's so much stuff springing up online now in these communities, right? You know, places strengthening community, you know, kids showing their creativity, confidence building. You know, it's becoming that and many other tools. It's just becoming a tool for powerful, a powerful tool for social change. You know, kids are educating their elders. They're looking around at the technology. Someone plugs in a Chromecast to the TV, and now they're casting things onto the TV, and then that, you know, that gets spread around the community. The kids are really just educating absolutely everyone. You know, it's a self-care culture. You know, when something breaks in my house, like the coffee machine or something like that, what do? First thing I do is go to YouTube. I don't call the help desk. I'm like, someone else got this problem, surely. There it is, you know, I can fix it. They're doing that for their cars, right? Telehealth. You know, travelling 500 kilometres, 300 kilometres to see a doctor is, you know, is difficult. There's now telehealth programs being deployed, apps where people can do telehealth. So, you know, digital access, it's fundamental to the economic, social and environmental well-beings of First Nations people. And, you know, any investment we make in this is going to deliver immeasurable benefit to the balance sheet of the nation. You know, don't talk to me about ROI. Now, I've got a minute and a half left. A few picks. So, the technology, solar powered, standalone cabinets, 300-400 megabits of connectivity in the communities. So might be several of these in the communities as well. And once we've got them in, there are base stations, right? There are POPs. And, you know, 3 in a community with about 30 or 40 houses. So, you know, over a gigabit of throughput in these communities. And then we start extending them out via mesh. And we put these little repeaters up, well, they're point-to-point backhauled wireless access points throughout the community, so they've got seamless coverage. And now we're starting to deliver it into the home as well. So, you know, they've got a free tier in the home, and perhaps if they want to upgrade in the future, they can go onto a premium plan at an affordable rate, a subsidised rate. So, making a massive difference. One of these communities, you know, we've seen 60 to 80 devices online, right? In the first month, we saw 4 terabytes of data go across that network. Now, you know, that's, what's that, 60 gigabyte per device. And this is what the future really looks like. So, you know, these are the cabinets we're installing and deploying into communities, full solar power on the roof, you know, bulletproof, delivering significant amounts of throughput, and, you know, we're starting to add things like, you know, we put this in, hey, what can we measure the impact of that now? And we will by giving government graphs. Government love graphs, right? If you work with government and you want to get a contract next year, you just give them the graphs, right, that demonstrate the ROI. So my time is up. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daryl.
No problem.
Does anyone have any questions for Daryl before he leaves the stage?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. So possibly you had a green field when you started to implement it. So you could bring pass points, hotspots, access points, and open roaming directly. You do not have to replace legacy, let's say, hotspots in coffee shops or something like this. Is correct? This is, maybe. And the second thing is, what happens in the urban areas of Australia? How is the acceptance of your concept with pass point and open roaming?
Sure. Well, you know, they're greenish brown, the sites. So, you know, they may have 1, 2, 3 hotspots. They're, you know, modern day commercial equipment. We operate many of them for the government. So we're able to deploy open roaming quite quickly onto those. It's just a configuration settings. In cases where, you know, many of these are solar powered sometimes, and, you know, big cabinets installed into buildings, where we do need to upgrade them, it's just a case of replacing the access point. So, and what's the adoption in more urban areas? Yeah, look, it's early days, but we're starting to see Telstra deploy open roaming, so they'll be able to use that. There'll be significant amounts of coverage there. We have a lot of libraries and government outlets and municipal Wi-Fi deployments around there, and they're provided by the state government, who are also co-funders of this project, and they basically allow it. It's a no-brainer for them. It's just like, absolutely, we understand it. Yes, let's do it. What does it mean for us? Okay.
Thank you, Darryl.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to invite our next guest speaker to the stage, Sean Seeley from Fusion. Welcome, Sean.
So first of all, thank you to the WBA for letting me join the organization. We are not Wi-Fi per se, but we are technology adjacent, and we support most of the projects that you're doing here and the work that you're doing. So, okay. So a little bit about, I'll start with a little bit about why we do what we do, and then I'll go into how we do what we do, and then we'll get very nitty-gritty with actual deployment and solution pictures. So if there's anyone here who's interested in deploying connectivity in what we call power deficient areas, then we have a solution for you. So we know for a fact that internet connectivity leads to increased economic growth, right? So it's obvious we're all here today benefiting from access to ubiquitous, always on, very fast connectivity. We're using AI, we're using productivity tools, and we are, as Darryl said, I call it the connectivity chasm, because we are speeding ahead of communities or countries or areas that don't have connectivity. And actually, recently, 2 weeks ago, Google came out with a report that said that increasing connectivity in sub-Saharan Africa by 1 percentage point would add 5.7% to GDP. Now, notwithstanding decreasing returns, think about today, 40% of sub-Saharan Africans use the internet. Now, the value that you could unlock by increasing that to 90% across the continent would quadruple the economy of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa as a continent. So think about all the services, all the products that you could sell, all the things that they could invest in if their economy was just double as big or 3 to 4 times larger, right? So we also know that when people get connected, when communities get connected, then they invest in themselves, because that's what we're used to where many of us live. So when you have connectivity, when you become richer, then you invest in the things that improve your livelihood. The issue we see is that although 40% of sub-Saharan Africa use the internet, there's a huge divide between what's urban and what's rural or remote, right? So 64% of urban Africans use the internet, only 23% in the rural remote locations do, which is causing the connectivity chasm that I mentioned before. So why is this? Well, one of the reasons is that connectivity today is provided by commercial enterprises that rely on a positive ROI. And there is no ROI, positive ROI, in deploying 4G or even 3G networks in rural or remote parts of Africa. The cost of supporting those sites is very, very expensive. That means that the people who live there are never going to benefit from ubiquitous connectivity, right? So, obvious. What's the underlying reason? So one of the major costs in supporting all those sites and connectivity is a lack of power. So we call it power deficiency. So over 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to a grid, a reliable grid power. If there is no grid, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no fiber, there is no nothing, right? 75% without access to electricity. So there's a huge potential to unlock if we can deploy connectivity and get people connected so that their communities grow, and then they invest in education, clean water, health, financial services, and they create the pull effect that makes everything come together. So that's our passion. enabling connectivity for everything and everyone. We're starting at the micro level, so we produce solar-charged industrial switches with PoE. So anything that's PoE enabled, we can more or less power that solution as long as the sun is shining. So our design philosophy is twofold: plug and play. That means that we support 48 or 24 volt PoE. Those are the 48 volt is the standard, 24 volt is the legacy, microwave and Ubiquiti and Microtik and other lower end Wi-Fi products use 24 volt. And then we focus on deploy and forget. So deploy and forget means we design our products to put them in the field, and they should stay there, and they should work for 8 to 10 years. Today our record is 5 years, and every day is a new record. Fusion, we leverage fusion power because the sun is essentially a fusion reactor. So the first product that we've launched now, and we do have revisions and more things coming out, but is the FTP300. So this is a 2-port industrial switch, 300 watt hours of power backup. That means that if you have a site with 20 watt total consumption, you'll have 15 hours of backup. In reality, your site can go on and on and on, 24/7, 365. And I'll show you in a few minutes. The current device is 100 megabit passive PoE. Next iteration, gigabit networking, and we do have an accessory for gigabit. It's in an aluminum cabinet, so it's rugged, it'll stay there, it'll work, and you're not susceptible to corrosion and things like that to the same extent as other materials. We use high-grade lithium-ion batteries. The batteries support 3,000 cycles. A charge cycle per day is around 8 years lifetime. Obviously, you need a dashboard so that you can sit in your NOx, comfy NOx somewhere, and you can see what's going on. Are the sites up? Are the sites down? Are they down because there wasn't enough solar power, so they just ran out and they'll go online again tomorrow? Or did they go offline because the network went offline? And that is actually the most common cause we see of sort of something being down is middle mile or backhaul. Fiber got cut, the microwave connection sort of became unstable and things like that. And so what are the common applications that we've done and that we support for this membership here? Municipal Wi-Fi being the obvious one. We've done, with the technology, close to 1,000 deployments across several countries in Africa. Video surveillance is what we believe to be a very large business opportunity. We work with some OEMs on that. Traffic control is interesting in several countries as a revenue generator for government. And for us, IoT is anything that isn't video surveillance, right? And then the microwave relay to extend links to the further locations. And finally, we're doing some testing with 2G base stations for DRC, Cameroon, and things like that. So obviously, it should be obvious, when you deploy fusion technology and fusion products, you are immediately addressing 3 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, number 1, or the first one, number 7, you are increasing the energy mix in the communities with solar power, so that's a good KPI. NGOs and large enterprises and governments will invest in that. You are improving the infrastructure of communities and countries. And those two together, as I showed in one of the first slides, invariably lead to increases in economic growth. So you are improving people's lives. So let's get nitty-gritty. Deploy and forget. The picture on the left, a solar-charged public Wi-Fi hotspot funded by a regulator in Mozambique in 2020, and it's still operating the last time we checked. So this is actually a Cambium site. You see our product below the solar panels, and Cambium Wi-Fi and Cambium microwave. And this was deployed across 10 regions or 10 states in Mozambique. And let me just walk away here. So the site on the right is one of the first ones we were in with the technology. University of California deployed an IoT POC project to do agricultural research, deployed in 2019. Again, last time we checked, still operating. So this is a pure solar solution. It just stays there, it just works. So what does that mean for municipal Wi-Fi? We are today in around 15 countries in Africa. Some of them are pretty hard to get to. Central African Republic, Nigeria, Somalia, the Gambia, Kenya, obviously, where we had a breakthrough, South Africa, and more. And we were introduced to an ISP in Kenya, in Nairobi, called ShockeyNet. They're a fiber-to-the-home provider. And they wanted to expand the value of their FTTH network. And they had already tried to develop their own solar solution, because even though they could deploy their infrastructure in the poles owned by the power company, there was no power available to them at the right voltages. So they've tried to do solar, and we've seen this a few times. It ends up being a costly, non-scalable science project. Right? So you have some engineers, they say, I can buy the inverter, I can buy the switch, I can buy a cabinet, I can do everything myself, and before you've in short time, you spent $1,000, and do you do that 1,000 times? Maybe not when you have Fusion Power with 3 years warranty, right? So we made a solution. So this is actually, it's sometimes complicated to make something look interesting when it's plug and play. So basically connecting the fiber ONU on DC power, because it doesn't have PoE in. Ethernet into the unit, E510 Cambium Wi-Fi access point, everything getting power from the solar panels. So they tested this for a few months at the beginning of the year, even during the rainstorms you might have heard about in Nairobi, and the site was up all the time. So they loved what they saw, and they decided to launch Washa Wi-Fi, which is supposed to be a public Wi-Fi network in Nairobi and Mombasa. Right? And obviously they are, or not obviously, but now they're talking about how can they work with other ISPs in Kenya to create a network that they can share with each other, and maybe open roaming or some sort of roaming technology is what they should look into. But this is how a public or municipal Wi-Fi network on solar power with fiber backhaul can look in Africa, or anywhere in the world that's power efficient. So how do we get to rural and remote? Same components, different technologies. Bluetown is an ISP that is active in Ghana, and they were funded by US aid to provide connectivity in communities that were a little bit like Daryl said, not distant by 1,500 kilometers. It takes an hour and a half to get there from Accra, but there's no mobile coverage and there's no power, right? So they had to build the connectivity solution themselves. So first, how do we get the connectivity there? Well, we built a micropop. So point-to-point link, 22 kilometers, put it on one power unit for maximum uptime, connected to an ePMP 3000L, microwave Omni, the bubble of connectivity, and that's how that could look. And I suspect they put it at ground level so that someone at the school where this is deployed can go and just wash off the solar panels once in a while. And how did it work? Well, according to the Cambium dashboard, over 6 months of system uptime when we checked in, right? So that means that hardware was powered on for at least 6 months, no downtime. Now, I'm not making any comments on the quality of the network, because there were some backhaul issues, but being powered is priority number one if you want to provide a reliable service that people want to pay for. Just like before, the Wi-Fi access points customers connect to. So instead of fiber, they use microwave to connect to the Omni microwave. And on the left is the site from that village. I think there were 5 sites providing coverage to 2,000 residents with Cambium Wi-Fi. In the middle is another site in Ghana with Ruckus. We are agnostic as long as it's PoE. And on the right side, you have a solution deployed in South Africa with Indio networks and TV white space as the middle mount. Again, we're agnostic. As long as it's PoE, as long as the equipment you're deploying fits within what we can support, you're good to go. 6 months uptime on the Wi-Fi hotspot. So I think uptime is requirement number one for positive ROI. Customers are not going to pay long-term plans if they expect to go to your site and it's offline, right? And this is a marketplace in Kenya. And on days where there is market activity, 300 to 400 people can access the Wi-Fi so that they can improve their business. I think they're selling livestock and different types of agricultural products here. So this is actually with the microwave link to a relay site that's 6 kilometers away, right? So this is a government project that's being deployed in Kenya right now. So that's Wi-Fi. Video surveillance. So very, very interesting market. Our first, most of our leads we actually get from OEMs. And we've been having several discussions with Meraki. They have a great range of Wi-Fi, but they also have a really great range of video cameras. So, and the dashboard technology and everything is more or less plug and play, but no power solution. And they were looking for something that's easy to deploy and that they sort of can trust. So we designed a solution with, it's an MV72 camera. Obviously, Meraki is mobile gateway or mobile focused, so it's an MG21 for the backhaul. This was for a partner in Australia. So there you see the solution. This is now being deployed at a mine by that partner in Papua New Guinea. Right? So they will be monitoring activities at the mine and in the villages to improve security and different other business-related issues. So if you could stand up a 5G base station or a microcell somewhere, you could deploy these anywhere that you have your mobile coverage, plus the sun is shining. The same partner in Australia deployed a solution for a master hire, which is a company that leases out construction equipment, and they, I think just to trial it out, they put a solution in the corner of the lot where they have the equipment, and within a week they actually had a break-in. So people broke in, cut the fence, and made off with tires and other types of construction equipment. I just want to state I did not pay anyone to break into that site to prove the point. And now we're waiting for the phase 2. Finally, IoT, and just to make the point here that most of the market we think we're going after is power deficiency, but even in Europe or the US or other parts of the world, you might have deployment situations where you want to deploy something short term, and the cost to get the grid or electricity there is expensive. So in Europe or the US, I suspect it would be man hours. You need to get certified electricians. You need to make sure people don't trip on wires and stuff. And we did a project with, we did a small part of a project with Galgus, also one of your members. So Galgus and NTT Data had to provide connectivity. Well, actually, it was Wi-Fi sensing and analytics to find out where are these 500,000 people that gather at this religious conference or religious ceremony in the south of Spain, and then use Wi-Fi sensing to relay that information to the 911 organization to find out if people need help or where are the people, right? And they had locations here because this is an old site. They had locations that they didn't have electricity. So again, plug and play. It's the same diagram, but here the Galgus Wi-Fi access point actually has mobile connectivity built in. So they're just connecting one device to the Fusion device, so mobile for backhaul, and they're providing all that Wi-Fi sensing data back to their dashboard, and they can see what's going on. And that's the interim site they deployed. They deployed a few of those, and they took them down, and they're using them in new locations now. And there on the right side, then you see all the sensing data that Galgus provides to NTT Data and the government customer. So this is an easy way of deploying connectivity in a spot. It could be an event, outdoor event, provide the connectivity, concerts, etc. For 2 days, take it down and move on. So today we work with several WBA members. If there are others who want support, if you have salespeople who want to close deals in power deficient areas, have them speak with me, and then we will sort them out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
I certainly want to hold you up and see if we have any questions here. I can certainly relate to your presentation because many days I get up and I deploy and forget as well.
It's easy to do.
Any questions for Sean we have right now? Okay, I'm sure you can polish any of those that you may have for the panel session. Sean will be there with us.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite our next guest speaker, Giovanni Guerrieri from Guillermo. Welcome, Giovanni.
Hello, everybody. And this is a very quick presentation about an analysis that we have made in Italy about the Wi-Fi usage in connected communities and how it led us to adopt open roaming as authentication method. First of all, when I say connected community on this purpose, I'm talking about people that are sharing the same authentication method on a public Wi-Fi network. So I'm not talking about home, I'm talking about public Wi-Fi, just like library or municipality and that kind of application. This is our footprint we have in Italy. As you can see in this picture, we have several locations all around the country. And the consistency of over than 46,000 access points in this area, with over than 32 million of registered users on our platform. And as average, we have 255,000 simultaneous users. These are the global data we have. And clearly, this network, it's about municipality, but it's also about retailers, it's about hospitality, it's about all that kind of bar and restaurant, as you perfectly know. But almost 20,000 access points belongs to Wi-Fi communities. As I said, municipality Wi-Fi, libraries, public offices, which is actually the subject of this presentation today. Before moving forward, I always say that we are living the golden age of the Wi-Fi. So we're taking a look about the global amount of data globally. The Wi-Fi is super popular at home, offices, in the industrial, and all that kind of application. And even the clients are based on the Wi-Fi interface. So apparently, this is a very interesting opportunity for the companies that are managing the Wi-Fi access. But if you think about the kind of location that I mentioned before, this is not completely true. And I can prove that. This is the research that we made on our network, started from 2016. And as you can see, the number of users and the number of connections before the pandemic was growing, with no doubt about it. After the pandemic, for sure, during the pandemic, for sure, we have a crisis in terms of users and connection, but the recovery in recent years is not as big as expected. And we took a look at that, and we recognized that in the hospitality, in the retail, there's actually no difference before the pandemic. The big difference is about the public Wi-Fi. So we made a little investigation about that, starting from two different kind of connected communities from different sizes. The first one is a small one, 300 location in the western Emilia-Romagna, our hometown. And the network is owned by a multi-utility company which is owned by the local municipality. The second one is larger than that. It's about all the Liguria region, and it's owned by the local government. When I say it's owned, it means that the subject is paying for the infrastructure, is paying for the connectivity, and is paying for the services, okay? And the last one is a countrywide. We're talking about the mail service in Italy, so we're talking about a company who's owned by the central government with over than 10,000 post offices in the country. So very different in terms of size. And the first analysis was quite disappointing because what we see is that after the pandemic, the owner lost interest in maintenance, lost interest in updating the bandwidth, etc. So the data were absolutely low. I mean, we're not surprised about the new users because for sure when you launch a service, this is a very old network, starting in 2006, I think. So when we launch the services, you have the peak in new users, but during the time, the new users are totally decreases. But in this case, we see that the global performances of the network are very poor, and it represents typically a network that the owner is abandoning. So we took care of that, but it led us to make some additional analysis. So we move on the other one. And in this, okay, honestly, I cannot explain the peaks about the connection, but maybe it's the wrong day, I don't know. But in terms of users, we have a good new usage rate in the network, but as a trend, we're talking about the same thing. I mean, the users are not growing as expected. And this is strange, because in this case, the networks work great, the performances of the bandwidth is good. So there was something that requires a further investigation. As you can see in this picture, the new user, when the services was launched, peaked in 2016, and then we have a normal decrease on the new users rate. But in terms of connection, it's not as big as expected. And this is also the trend that we see in the larger network. We're talking about 10,000 locations, so quite big. And in this case, we have the same trend in terms of users and connections. So this is something which regards the global user experience. So we had the opportunity to make, to send an email to the user that actually gave us the opportunity to interact with them. And the question was, which is the main concern about using the public Wi-Fi? I mean, do you have any concern about using the public Wi-Fi? And honestly, we're all expecting a problem about the poor user experience, because this is the key of the presentation. We do believe that in the public Wi-Fi, the captive portal paradigm is a dreadful experience. I mean, the users now don't like that. The people now hate that. They don't want to have a captive portal to put the password anytime that they reach the location. They don't at disposal to have an experience which is different than the one they have on the cellular. So that's exactly what we were expecting. But as a matter of fact, we had a very more sophisticated feedback from the users. Not very much, 1,000 people, but it's quite important, I think. For sure, the poor user experience is definitely the key. I mean, again, the dreadful experience on the captive portal is something that the users are not at disposal to stand anymore. I think that everybody knows that. But we also find big concerns about security, because think about when you connect to the open network, the operating system is telling you that you are connecting to the unsecure network. And you can find on YouTube thousands of videos that are telling you how poor is the security in the public Wi-Fi, and which is the dangers that you're facing with by accessing the public Wi-Fi. And third, the privacy. As you know, in Europe, we have a very strong regulation about the privacy with the GDPR regulation. And this is something that became very important from the user's perspective. So these are the problems that we think are affecting the public Wi-Fi today, at least on our networks. And that's why we were looking for something was able to face with these limitations. And that's why we have adopted open roaming as a new authentication method for the public Wi-Fi. We can definitely have a federation between the network. So as expected by the users today, once you accept to access a network, you are not at disposal to have a different experience on different networks. So the federation is the key. But also accessing to encrypted network can definitely solve any security and privacy issue. And last but not the least, having a very frictionless experience on the Wi-Fi is the key to have a very solid usage rate in this kind of application, in this kind of networks. Yeah, this is it. This is my very quick presentation about the analysis we did. What about us? We are based in Italy, in Reggio Emilia, and we have a branch office in Albania where we're taking care about all the technical support for the system we used to deploy, and we have a sales office in the United States, in Chicago. Okay? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giovanni. I'd like to keep you on the stage for the panel. For the panel, yeah. I'd also like to invite David, as well as Mattel and Sean back to the stage for a panel discussion on connecting communities and the underserved. Thanks, everyone. I'd like to continue this discussion around connecting communities and connecting the underserved, particularly. And so, I'd like to start by asking each of you to provide a brief description to the audience of those obstacles and challenges and successes that you find are the highlight of your particular efforts in providing Wi-Fi services to the empowerment of the underserved. And perhaps we could start with David, then Mattel, and then Sean and Giovanni, and David and Mattel, if you could start with the introduction and what you do for the audience, please.
Please. Hi everyone, I'm David Wilkins. I head up the Smart City team at Westminster City Council. So my role covers ensuring Westminster has the digital infrastructure it needs to succeed, and that's a combination of both fibre, mobile and also Wi-Fi. I'm also responsible for our digital inclusion programs. So this is very much about how we support citizens, businesses to access and use that infrastructure, very much to kind of enrich their lives. And then finally, responsible for developing our Smart City operating system. And this is a modern data platform using IoT, image AI to deliver insights to different parts of the business to improve outcomes. In relation to your particular question, I guess we can break down underserved in two ways within Westminster. Unlike some of the presentations you saw before, we don't have rural parts of Westminster. We don't have a coverage problem. If you look at Westminster's connectivity, we pretty much have ubiquitous 4G and 5G outdoor coverage. But that only tells part of the picture. The challenge we have in Westminster is a capacity problem. So there's insufficient bandwidth to go and distribute amongst the million visitors that we receive per day. So in order to identify where we have these capacity problems, we use our waste fleet, garbage trucks, depending if you're UK or American, and we travel around the city and do kind of download, upload speed tests to understand what is the network performance of the 4 mobile network operators. And then that really helps to shine a light on where we have deficiencies in network connectivity. I'm just going to shine a light on one that we have. So our street markets, so they're typically traders selling food, incredibly busy parts of the city. And during peak times, the mobile networks can't cope with the amount of data that's flowing through those networks. So what we did, and interestingly, it was actually a ruckus network that we put up there, but we put Wi-Fi in to support and improve the kind of capacity that both the traders had to support their business, but also customers. So I guess that's one part of underserved within Westminster. The other is around underserved by choice. So we run digital inclusion programs in order to identify kind of barriers to being connected. We interviewed lots of residents across the city and understood the kind of personas and root causes of why people are either choosing or are unable to connect to kind of the digital services that are readily available across the city. And many of those kind of challenges stem from they can't afford to access, they don't have the confidence or the skills to access, or they don't have access to kind of suitable devices. So we basically carried out those kind of interviews, we developed some personas and categorized them, and then we mapped that across the city. So we understand the locations where kind of people are underserved, but they're underserved through choice. And then we support and empower them to kind of access digital connectivity. Hopefully that's a useful insight.
It's a great answer, and it certainly changes the dynamic from the rural to the urban marketplace in terms of underserved, and so it's great. Mattel?
Okay, so I see many of you are in the same seat. I assure you that this is the last time I'm on the stage for this show. I'm Mital Parekh. I'm responsible for product marketing and technical marketing at Ruckus Networks. And before I go any further, David, thank you. This was my live case study. If I know that this is being recorded, we'll transcribe this and make a one-pager out of it. I'm really thankful for that. But exactly what he just mentioned. So let me give you a brief overview of how we are delivering connected communities, okay? When you see Ruckus Networks, we work with our partners, so we don't say that we are it, okay? We work together with our partners, be it technology partners, implementation partners, to identify opportunities to improve quality of life. I'll give you a couple of examples, okay? Underserved, again, it's a very highly loaded term. It's like 180 degrees. One example would be Hidalgo County in Texas. It's a highly rural area where students did not have connectivity at home to do homework. And imagine COVID time frame, right? Forget about commerce, forget about healthcare or public services. All the way on the other side, what if I told you that city of San Jose in Silicon Valley has patches where they do not have connectivity? This is true, right? Just because it's Silicon Valley, it's not that everybody is a millionaire and everybody is connected via a multi-gig network, right? So there's a spectrum of underserved community based on their needs, whether it is basic needs for delivering just connectivity for students, or public services, or even commerce. All the way on the other side, we offer or we deliver with our partners connectivity options where we are flourishing e-commerce or commerce of all types. So I come to you with a couple of examples whenever the time is right, but for us, it's an entire spectrum of situations or case studies or use cases where we solve for.
That's very interesting. I mean, in a lot of urban marketplaces, you would think that with the access and accessibility, you have, and sometimes multiple carriers, 1, 2, and 3, but yet you have sometimes a 30, 40% of the population that doesn't have a take rate on high-speed broadband services. And there's a question around affordability when it comes to that. Obviously, a lot of other reasons. But Let's move on to Giovanni and talk about some of those obstacles and challenges and successes that highlight your efforts in connecting the unserved and unconnected.
Yeah, as you say, the real issue about the affordability of that. And in Italy, we used to call that white area, where the operator considered that area as a failure from the market standpoint. And in this case, I would say that the central government and the local government are disposed to fund the building of this infrastructure for recover that situation, sometimes with the fiber, sometimes with the radio. And we're not very expert about that part of activities because that's not our job, but for sure, trying to recover the digital divide we have is one of the key in the main activities of the local and central government. In many cases, I see that as far as regards the public Wi-Fi, where we're active, we see that the best way to actually achieve the fund to offer that kind of service is about finding somebody, some public or private entity that are disposed to invest in the infrastructure and connectivity. That's our experience.
You know, it's a big issue about, I mean, I sort of mentioned it in the opening of this in terms of how we would address that. There's many municipalities who are raising their hand to find new taxpayer funds to subsidize closing the digital divides. And there are some municipalities that have their hands tied in reference to being able to acquire new funds or prepare new grants or even participate in a private-public partnership to solve closing the digital divide. And we'll address that issue perhaps a little later if we have time about how municipalities may, from a federal, state, local, country level, in terms of subsidizing free public Wi-Fi networks. So Sean, I'll go over to you about some of the obstacles and challenges and successes, and you've covered them well in your presentation, but I'll let you expand on that some.
So let's take the success first. I had a chance a few years ago to visit that village in Ghana, to see firsthand what is it that the connectivity does and what do people do with it when they get connected or when they have access to, in this case it was videos on agricultural outputs. And I met this woman slightly older than myself, Janet, and she was pushy, she was a go-getter, but she had, through the program that Bluetown was deploying, acquired a smartphone. And they had taught her how to use the smartphone, because many people that haven't used a smartphone before don't know what to do with it. And she had learned to load the videos and watched videos on how to improve her output or how to improve her smallholder farm outputs. And she had actually doubled her income. Right? So that was a heartwarming experience. Now, what keeps us from success, or what makes it challenging where we are in many instances, is financing, right? So we are adding a component to a solution that is adding cost, very often in areas where they have less funds to invest, right? So what we do is we work with the Danish government to finance our customers' total solutions, and today we have the first of many, I hope, but we have a customer in Eastern Africa that has been approved for a considerable financing to roll out hundreds of Wi-Fi hotspots.
That's exciting, actually, to hear that there's financing for that. You know, one of the questions I wanted to ask you in reference to economic impact and finances, particularly in developing countries, is, do you measure, or do you have metrics in terms of measuring what the economic impact is, subject to having issues, particularly with power and scarce power for networks that you deploy around? What happens when this power may be scarce or it falls down? Do you have a response from the municipality, from the citizens, from other areas that you have to solve in your networks?
That's a very good, well thought out question. I don't have an answer. Okay. We are often a little bit removed from what's going on the ground at deployment and operations. They just tell us, are the lights green or is it red, or is it heading towards yellow, bad? And to my knowledge, there is no research that shows what is the optimum level of connectivity uptime. So in my mind, it's 100%, right? I don't know if you know, but when you are dealing with these economies or in these countries, very often the mindset is, people aren't used to better, right? So everyone is used to this, the mobile network being offline 8 hours a day. And to me, that's unacceptable, because people will pay if the service is good, but there is no research, to my knowledge, that states actually being down 6 hours a day is fine, and you pay too much in extra capex to get the last uptime.
I'm sure there's issues with respect to dependency on Wi-Fi, with transportation to telehealth to other services that certainly will be measurable in time, so that we can sort of measure that economic impact on a society. But I want to go back to a question of open roaming and lessons learned about networks. And so I'll go to David for this question. There's other boroughs in Greater London, like the borough of Barnet, has similar but a slightly different approach to connecting those that are currently underserved. And so are you in communications with those other borough officials in Greater London to collaborate on a uniform policy to share lessons learned from one borough to another? And how might that work with the open roaming arrangement that you manage now?
Yeah, so I'll start by just showing a little bit more about what we're doing with open roaming. So within Westminster, we have a large number of free public Wi-Fi networks. Some of them are deployed by the municipality, ourselves. Some of them are deployed by business improvement districts. We have some deployed by community halls. So there's quite a few kind of fragmented networks. And I think Ivan put this quite well yesterday in his slides, where he demonstrated his journey from, I think it was Italy to here today. And the different portals that you had to access in order to kind of get connected and get online. And I guess we have that experience in that micro scale in Westminster. So people who are experiencing data poverty, if they want to use public Wi-Fi networks, they have to kind of connect, and as they move around, authenticate. And our user research indicated that that's a big frustration for users. So we're embracing open roaming, and we're enabling it on our own council networks, but we're also working with other organisations in Westminster to accept the identity that Giovanni is providing us. So we basically want to leverage existing investments in kind of free public Wi-Fi, join them together so that from a user perspective, they receive a really positive outcome. And in relation to sharing, so a lot of our work has been funded by the GLA, so that's the mayor. And as part of that, we are going to be kind of sharing what we do. We have quite a few different ways of sharing. So London is made up of 33 different local authorities. They're broken into things called sub-regional partnerships, which come together and discuss connectivity challenges. And something that we're really keen to do is, once we get open roaming kind of across multiple networks, is demo it, showcase it with other local authorities, and encourage them to kind of onboard their networks and other networks in their municipality. Because I guess the benefit from open roaming is that critical mass of people who have it, and users will really benefit from a network of that type.
It sounds like it's encouraging that you're talking to other borough leadership under authority, right?
Just it goes beyond London as well.
Yeah.
So we've been talking to Manchester, we're talking to other city councils,
so
because lots of people come to work in London. I don't live in London, I live in Colchester, but I get the train every day. So we are exploring how this can work kind of across the nation. But it'd be great to have some kind of cross-continent open roaming. So I know Japan are doing some great things. We've heard things from Dublin. It'll be great to see some of this kind of long-distance open roaming.
I think you've made a great point for our next panel, I think. I want to go to Giovanni and ask a question about how your platform, how your services might provide uniform services to those other you described as independent networks that you may serve or adopt, which may all have different OEM equipment. And how do you treat those networks agnostically as well as equitably, right? And delivering services and data analysis at the end of the day.
That's a big challenge we are facing every day. I mean, the idea to build an agnostic network is the idea behind our activities in Sever. And yeah, we made research about that. We make tests every day about all the different vendors, all the different technologies, and we try to actually keep this approach very agnostic and. Yeah, it's just a matter of engineering, you know, and understanding exactly what the protocols are and how the protocols works and how to put together. Because when you think about public Wi-Fi, as a matter of fact, there are several subjects that are working together and cooperate together in order to bring the service available. Maybe the end user see the signal in the air, and that's okay. But behind the scene, there are several elements and companies that are working together. We are part of that, and. Yeah, coming back to open roaming, just to make an example, we definitely find a very interesting solution to solve the three problems that I mentioned before. For sure, the frictionless access is one of the key, but let me stress again the theme of security, because I was surprised about the data and the concerns about the security for the users, and this is something that is very difficult to manage, and it's a big part of our activities today. So, to answer your question, I think that the research and the experience of the engineer is the key to offer reliable services as expected by the end users. Yeah.
Well, I know it's kind of a challenge. I mean, I had some of the same experience in New York trying to federate multiple independent Wi-Fi operators, bringing them to the table, understanding what their network equipment actually is, and then understanding their business case of operations. Some had issues with finance, some had issues with legal, some had issues with generating revenue over the network, some had issues with partnering with other networks that weren't as robust as theirs to bring into the partnership. And so managing those particular challenges and sort of bringing in sort of a federation of networks so that you might have a ubiquitous and seamless experience is a big challenge. So that's kind of why I asked you the question instead of me answering it. I want to ask a question to Mittal about infrastructure some. And so I wanted to find out if you can answer what type of additional infrastructure is necessary to expand or host Wi-Fi footprints in both urban and rural communities. And what could municipalities do to facilitate the expansion of Wi-Fi to underserved communities that they're not doing now?
Okay, so I'm not a big believer of presidential debates, but I'm still going to take this opportunity to answer first two questions.
Okay.
So here's the thing, you asked previously as to what are the challenges, and we talked about finance.
Yes.
Finance is just one of the challenges. When you build a connected community, whether it's urban environment or rural, there are way more challenges than just money. Even if you throw money at that problem, it's going to take a whole lot more things. So if you play chess, you know it's a two-dimensional struggle. Think about multi-dimensional chess. That's what you play when you put together a rural or urban connected community. Mm-hmm. We see this every single day, every single week. That is right from finding the right technology partner, okay, because we deliver best Wi-Fi. But what about bringing those bits to the point where Wi-Fi could be delivered? 2, getting permits to do what we want to do, right? Getting every city official or offices to agree to the plan, okay? You will see that there are as many opinions as heads or minds, and it's very difficult to make a case with each of them and say, this is for community good, win-win-win situation. So money is not the only one. Okay? It takes a lot of time, and I can share with you that on my website we have a case study on, again, Hidalgo County and City of San Jose, and it walks you through how many hurdles that we overcame with our partners to deliver just that. Simple things like, do you have a pole at the right location to be able to mount a Wi-Fi AP? Oh, you don't? It's going to add 3 more months or quarters to put a pole at a given place, because guess what? There is a gas line underneath, or electricity, or a fiber cable underneath, or what have you, right? We have gone through almost every such scenario. Second thing you asked about powering, or where does the power come from? Well, it comes from variety of places. Where we've seen is, we've used mix of batteries and even photovoltaic cells, solar cells, in order to make sure that each of these devices are powered accordingly. Now, you asked about the current question, that is infrastructure. So we work with a variety of partners in order to deliver this delightful experience of Wi-Fi, ubiquitous Wi-Fi in rural or urban area. Think from bringing fiber to the edge of this network or rural community, so to speak, or maybe it's a point-to-point network along with fiber, right? You will see that each of these situations has a very, very different mix of infrastructure pieces coming from variety of vendors, and then comes even more difficult task of building a blueprint or a topology that is going to be able to accommodate all these things and make them work hand in hand. So it's so I can tell you that right now we are building a connected community in townships of South Africa. Very good presentation, by the way. I took a picture. And it's a mix of fiber and Wi-Fi, that to enterprise-grade Wi-Fi and residential Wi-Fi, right? It's a mix of that. We have built a connected rural community where it was mix of fiber, point-to-point, and then Wi-Fi. So as you can see, it requires, they say that it requires a village. This is indeed, it requires an entire village to be able to deliver that kind of a community. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure,
so I think what's important here is, especially when you're dealing with areas that have not been well connected or connected at all before, first so we in Fusion deal with the first problem is, besides the Wi-Fi, how do you ensure that it works all the time? And then you find out what's the next issue. Well, maybe people don't have smartphones, or they don't know why they should buy a smartphone. So then in some communities, you need to deal with that, right? And maybe you need to make partnerships with NGOs who come in with their smartphones. Then you give someone a smartphone. Now what do they do with it? Well, they shouldn't watch YouTube videos all the time or cat videos. They need to get the real content to have an impact, positive impact on their life. So then you need to get someone in, maybe an NGO, to train them on how to use the smartphones, get the most value out of this internet access you suddenly have access to. And maybe then there's another problem at the other end of that. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I've been involved in solving the first 3 to 4 issues. And then eventually people will find it natural, and they will attain a level of experience where they want to consume more.
So let's talk about that a bit more, digital adoption and expanding Wi-Fi, particularly in urban and suburban and rural areas. I think, Sean, you touched on that some too. I want to kind of get back to David and talk about, what the cities are doing in reference to this digital literacy and reference to expanding Wi-Fi areas, because it's not just one thing to have infrastructure, solve the access issue. You may already have one or two incumbents there. You may already have mobile network operators there, but to the extent the public would need support from municipalities as well as private sources in terms of digital literacy, how do you manage that at a municipal level, David?
So we have exactly the same challenges that you have when you're deploying to really rural areas. So I think I talked about it in my introduction, but some people just don't have the motivation to be online, or they're scared of their device. So we run something called Digital Ambassadors, which is where we train people in the local community to provide one-to-one digital advice for their peers, and that was one of the outcomes of our persona-based research. So from our interviews, we found out where did people want to receive their digital skills advice and support, and it typically wasn't from the Googles, the Microsofts, the big players. They wanted to receive that advice from friends, families, and loved ones, because there's already that kind of trust inbuilt. So we run these one-to-one sessions. People can bring their device and ask about anything. And we tackle issue after issue. So they might want to do something really basic like, I don't know, change the calendar that they use, the calendar app, so they can keep track of their appointments. They might want to, lots of people have issues with the amount of photos that they have, and then they're getting reminders about, do you want to pay some money and you can upgrade your storage? So some basic device maintenance. And then once you've got them hooked or brought in, it could be through like ancestral, like doing genealogy. That gets them really kind of excited about digital. It then supports them to do some of the things that are kind of not necessarily financially beneficial, but kind of deliver positive health outcomes. So more and more of the NHS is kind of becoming online. We have people who come to our appointments and they have received an email from the NHS about an online Zoom call. They have no clue what Zoom is. They don't know how to reply to an email. Because we have these sessions, we can ensure that they get the healthcare that they need. And it's those things that will help to contribute to kind of reducing health inequality that we have in the borough. Sadly, the kind of wealthiest parts of Westminster will live 15 years longer than kind of one tube stop along. So this digital can help kind of support us to deliver some outcomes that help to address that kind of health inequality.
Can I ask a quick question? So does your constituents being digital, does that decrease your cost?
Yeah, so volunteers do the one-to-one support. Yeah, we're not having to kind of pay the staff to do the training.
No, that wasn't what I meant. I meant was when a larger part of the population is online, does that then decrease the costs? So cost to serve, we have people calling in via phone, going to in-person appointments. By having more of these kind of virtual offerings, the cost to serve does become lower. More and more things are managed kind of digitally. There are apps for hypertension, a whole host of different, but in order for people to access that, they need to have the basic digital literacy. So that's one of the benefits to the council, but also the wider kind of public sector, but also the private sector as well. People are more able to access some of the commercial offerings like Netflix and Amazon Prime and things like that.
I'd like to kind of take us back a little bit in sort of questioning the unserved and the unconnected. We talked about a lot of public free Wi-Fi, but there's also the inclusion of other audiences for free public Wi-Fi, particularly that of providing services to small businesses, as well as community anchor institutes and public safety and law enforcement, etc. How do you, and anyone can answer this, I mean, I know, Giovanni, you mentioned that in Italy that you were serving and managing a lot of the post offices, for example, and so how is it that you assess these small businesses, these community anchor institutes, these other agencies in municipalities as being unserved and or unconnected? How do you measure that? Where do you get the data set from?
You say measure?
Yes. In the U.S., for example, today everyone is running around trying to figure out, you know, where the unconnected, where the unserved, where the unfunded is by utilizing, you know, government data sets by FCC BDC data, and that becomes revamped every single 3 or 4 months, and then another data set comes out, and then so you have to map all over again the residential, the small businesses, the community anchor institutes, and who is served, who is not served, and then go after new funding to provide that service. And so how do you think that's done in other developing countries and other locations like the UK?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that the post offices. In this case, the network is about offering to the people that are going to the offices a good connectivity for all the services that the post office is offering. So the idea is that once you have the access to the internet and it is frictionless and effective, you can actually access to all the services that they're offering. And this is the case. Clearly, they are all suffering with all the issues that I mentioned. So the authentication is a solid issue, especially now with the micro-randomization that we're all expecting. It's going to be very difficult to make frictionless authentication. That's why open roaming can be a solid solution for that problem. But yeah, that's a very big customer. That's a very, very big infrastructure. They have no problem in funding the money to pay for this infrastructure. In other cases, it's much more difficult, but we're trying actually to make a sort of advisor for this interlocutor and find the best solution for their needs. No? Again, we're not very active in digital divide. I mean, we're offering services to the city, to the municipality, where the connectivity is not an issue. But again, typically every single interlocutor have their very specific problem to solve, and we're trying to be a sort of advisor for that.
Happy to come in on our approach in Westminster. So we do that mapping as well. So we get data from Ofcom, I think it's about 3 times a year, which provides which of the properties that are served. But we supplemented that data with our knowledge of where the market was going to build. So we engaged with a lot of the fibre providers, understanding where they're planning to build. And our approach was typically the locations that weren't going to be built to, there were some complex engineering challenges to building there. So the types of things I'm talking about, a lot of infrastructure is deployed via OpenReach, so BT OpenReach infrastructure. Some properties are served by directly buried cable, so it's not possible to pull fibre through those ducts. So in order to serve those places, you typically need to dig. Digging in somewhere like Westminster is incredibly expensive. So it's not necessarily the kind of core dark fibre rings that need to be built. It's about how you get from the points of presence to the individual properties. There's lots of ways people do that. Additional ducting is some. Tim's here from Community Fibre, they use telegraph poles. But the way the municipality do it, instead of funding subsidising the market, we do demand stimulation. So we will cover up to, we ran a business voucher scheme up to £2,000 toward the build costs. So a provider, it basically de-risks the investment from the provider. So some of the locations where there was no planned build, it became viable because of the government subsidy. But that was demand-led, not kind of supply. the outcomes of that, so the businesses we connected, we engaged with them, and so we connected about 850 businesses over the course of the scheme. The turnover growth 1 year after being connected was about 2.1% increase in turnover, and that equated to something like I think it was £800 million worth of additional revenue for these firms. But then there was a cost-saving element as well, which was a similar order of magnitude. So the benefits were huge to the kind of business participating, and the types of things they were doing. They were able to use sensors within their property to better manage their stock in their kitchens, better optimize their fryers in kind of restaurant settings. So that provision of connectivity really kind of changed how businesses operated in the borough.
That sounds great. I think we're starting to get close to our time, so I'd like to leave some time to the audience to ask the panel questions about connecting communities and underserved. So please, if you have questions, please, it's a good time to ask the panel.
Hi, thank you. Question for Giovanni, actually. Just up here.
Oh.
Very interested in your study around the open roaming and where you highlighted the barriers to readoption of users of public Wi-Fi. Now, probably everybody sitting in this room believes open roaming and Passpoint is secure as mobile, etc. How good do you think we are at sending that message to the market so they believe public Wi-Fi is now secure?
Well, we're not far. I think that, for example, with David, I think we are doing a good job in adopting the new protocol. And for what is my recent experience with the administration in Italy, there's definitely more sensitivity about this topic, because as a matter of fact, they already made an investment in the infrastructure, they pay for the bandwidth, and they want to see a big usage rate on this network. So basically with open roaming, we're offering a new perspective, and I think that now it's ready to be adopted massively, at least in the country we're working with. And yeah, I think it's a right moment to move forward on that.
Can I just say one thing? I think the reason that people are apprehensive about Wi-Fi now is that modern smartphones show you a big warning message when you're trying to connect to an open network, right? So people get afraid, and they say, I'm not going to do that, right? So I think open roaming, if you can implement it correctly, it's secure Wi-Fi, will solve those issues. And as long as those phones are attaching in the background or attaching without warning the customer or the user, then you won't see the same issues.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting discussion today. And I just want to say from Germany, there are effectively in the communities downtown no public hotspots. The communities sometimes they wanted to, but there were, let's say, the mobile operators said you don't need, everybody has a mobile phone. And so at least it is a problem for the communities. And the second problem is that they don't have personnel, technical personnel, which is in position to write the tender. And particularly each new German government says there will be $500 million of funding to upgrade the broadband in communities. But not even 10% of this is used because nobody knows how to do it inside the communities. There is a big lack. And there are still complaints that many communities outside of the central areas do not have broadband. And there is a force to the operators that think even to do a law about this to force them to distribute broadband all over the country. So somehow it's true what you say, that also even in urban areas, so let's say well-developed countries, there are gaps. I just wanted to add perhaps a thing in Greece where there are a lot of islands. There, the cellular network is so good that when you are on a boat traveling from one island to the other, you have always coverage, cellular coverage. This is a very interesting point where the service is quite good. And some, as far as I know, some cities are trying to set up also public hotspots. So it depends really the differentiations from country to country. But how do you solve the lack of technical expertise in communities if you want to serve them? Do you consult them, or do you just provide the solution as a black box?
So I guess that's for me. So the approach that we take to kind of ensuring everyone has good broadband is we focus on creating the right conditions for the market to invest. So that is a multitude of breaking down different barriers. So one of the big costs that the market have is suspending parking bays when you dig. So we reduce that cost to create incentives for them to build. Specifically around some of the social housing, one of the things that we did was we kind of removed some of the legal challenges associated with connecting them. So our initial approach when connecting some of our social housing was we had a way leave. A way leave is the legal agreement between the landowner and the broadband provider to serve that property. We were doing that on a site-by-site basis. So every single site we had a separate agreement, and that the only people that won in that scenario was the lawyers, if we're completely honest. So we standardized that, and we had a kind of citywide way leave agreement. So all of our social housing was covered by this single way leave. So that was 21,000 units, and that becomes quite an attractive opportunity for broadband providers. Once that framework was in place, we saw investment from Community Fibre sitting right behind you. We had G Network, OpenReach, Virgin, Hyperoptic, all wanting to connect. And to help with some of the kind of technical aspects, we had kind of a constraints document. So this set out to the market how we expect them to behave when they're deploying to our housing stock. So it covered things like if they're drilling in our blocks, they need to do third-party fire stopping. So it takes away some of the kind of technical challenges of serving a block. And something that was fundamental in that approach is every fibre provider serving that block had to engage with the community. So we have residents associations within those blocks. The fibre provider presented what their plans are, what they're doing, and then there was continual communication with residents. So they're notified when the initial build is going to take place, and then once they're able to take service, they get given another letter. And something that we negotiated as part of that was they provide a free connection into the community hall. So a location where residents can go to and kind of access kind of free Wi-Fi. So hopefully that answers your question.
Can I just chime in quickly? Because sure. I think that Wi-Fi has and fast Wi-Fi, ubiquitous Wi-Fi, has the potential to change millions of people's lives, for example, in Africa. But one of the main things holding it back is lack of skills and the lack of understanding of the technology, right? So I've been in conversations where the discussion was on why should we deploy this Ruckus or Meraki Wi-Fi AP with all this technology when we have another lower cost AP. It's 2.4 gig only, but it's just blasting a signal very, very far, right? So what's the difference for the end users and how does it work? I said yesterday on a podcast that I thought AI for Wi-Fi was the next hype cycle. I take it back. I actually do think that AI and ML as a technology to help ISPs and community Wi-Fi operators set up and deploy and manage using AI complicated networks easily can change a lot of things for the positive. I think that's a great use of that technology.
I think we are out of time, so we can, one more question? Okay, I think we're out of time, but I want to thank the panel for joining us for this Connected Communities. Please thank our panel for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our Wireless Global Congress, EMEA PREs come to an end. I want to thank you all for staying until the last session of the day. I just want to say that all the presentations from yesterday and today will be shared. So you are going to receive one email with a questionnaire to give your feedback to the event. And on that email, we'll have the information of all the presentations from the Congress yesterday and today. Once more, I just want to thank you to our sponsors for making this event possible. And I want as well to share with you that if we enjoyed yesterday and today the content, the presentations, and the discussions, please consider to be part of one of our events for 2025. We are going to have our Congress in January in Thailand, Bangkok. Then in May will be our Congress in Dallas, US, and we'll be back to Paris in October, 1 year from now. And with this, I will just wish you all safe travels back home. And if you planning to stay in Paris, enjoy Paris and have a good time. Thank you, everyone.